Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. As always, please just bear with me while I double check to make sure everything appears to be working on my end, because as we all know by this point, if I do not do that, that's when issues arise, because technology and I have that kind of relationship. Okay, so everything does seem to be working on my end. Welcome, Thomas. Welcome, Alan. Good to see both of you. And to answer your question, Thomas, I think the last week's experiment went pretty well. I think I've gotten good enough that I don't necessarily need to pre-watch to have a good stream. So I'm gonna try, sticking with the blind reactions because, I mean, partly because I think I'm just happy that I don't need to do it anymore. I think I've gotten good enough at talking on stream that it's just not necessary for me to have that level of preparedness. And also, it's just nice to not have to spend an hour plus to prepare for each stream. So, yeah. So, I'm going to keep going blind until it stops working. So, so we're almost through with Mushoku Tensei, actually. We've got this week, and then next week will be the end of Season 2. You can take my viewership from... You agree? Yeah, hey, it is what it is, man. You know how YouTubers are. We have this pathological need for attention, and we don't care who we take it from. Yeah. Okay, I am a little tired right now, but that's because I woke up like less than an hour ago, so that should improve as time goes on. I have ADHD, so I did take my stimulants. That should wake me up very soon as well. So, so we're almost done with Mushoku Tensei. We got this week and next week before we're caught up, and I believe Season 3 is not happening until sometime in 2026, so obviously we're going to have to switch to something else. So, again, I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of the stream, and definitely more next week about what we're going to be doing next, but I have a couple ideas of what I want to do as far as next. We could kind of stick to the same general approach to what we're doing and just kind of pick a different series. Frieren is one I've been wanting to watch. However, it's on the list for the daily streams, so I'm going to want to at least hold off until I've done that. So we're not going to start off with that right away. Another option is the Muv-Luv alternative anime, because I'm a big Muv-Luv fan. I feel like I have a lot to say about it. I did make a video on Season 1, have never seen Season 2, so I figured that could provide some interesting stuff to say. Another option is to, pick something else entirely. And another option would be to actually read the Mushoku Tensei light novels on stream and discuss those, kind of like we've been doing with the anime. So, again, anyone who's watching, just kind of keep those ideas in mind. We'll see what we end up doing. I mean, ultimately, it is going to be my decision as far as what we do, but of course, I do want to get the input from the people who actually watch the streams, because you guys are the ones being entertained, hopefully. So, yeah, I 100% agree. The Muv-Luv visual novels are absolutely incredible. Muv-Luv Alternative remains my favorite visual novel, and it's been a long time since I've read it. I mean, there's been some other really good ones I've read since then, but nothing quite comes to the level of Alternative. And I still need to finish a lot of the other side stuff. I've read Photon Flowers, I believe it was. Still need to read Photon Melodies and TDA and Schwartz and Markin. I do own them because I got that big Muv-Luv bundle from Humble a while back. But yeah, I haven't gotten around to reading them yet. But yeah, Muv-Luv, and also for those who don't know, because this is a long time ago, Muv-Luv is kind of the first video I made that really kind of sparked a community. So I had made other videos that had done well before. I mean, and I had already made my Toho video, which that's still the most viewed video on my channel. But when I made my Muv-Luv video, that's kind of where like I got viewers who were actually like interested in what I had to make, people who were passionate about the subject I was talking about. And again, the first time I felt a sense of community on YouTube, it was because of that Muv-Love video. So Muv-Love, on top of it being a great story, it's something that is kind of does hold a special place in my heart as a creator. So that's one of the reasons I'm interested in seeing how, how streaming the alternative adaptation would go, because and I think it would also be a fun contrast to what we're doing now, where these streams are going to, with Mushoku Tensei, because I think the Mushoku Tensei anime does a very good job. It's largely glazing. So it could be fun to look at an adaptation that is not very good. And so I could just kind of crash out on stream for a couple hours a week. So yeah, but that's just one option of things we could do once we're through with Mushoku Tensei. We still have some time to think about it, and yeah, and again, ultimately, I'll be able to make a decision one way or another. It's just, ideally, it would be nice if the people who actually watch the streams had some input. So yeah, let's just get started.
ベガリット大陸へ行く。そう決めたはいいが、シルフィに話して泣かれでもしたら決心が鈍りそうだった。俺はまず I mean,
I'll be honest. One thing is, I tend to be fairly positive in my reviews and coverage, just because, and it's not like a conscious decision I make. I just actually genuinely tend to like the things that I engage with. And I think even stuff that's not very good, when I kind of actually like look at it a little bit in a deeper way, because I just kind of have the type of brain that does that. So when I look into stuff a little bit deeper, see the little things it does, think about it, I tend to appreciate things more, even if they're not very good. So that's the reason a lot of my videos tend to be positive. It just happens to be how I consume stuff. But the times that I do review something that I dislike, those are some of the most fun videos I can make, because it can be really fun to just tear into something, even in kind of the measured and calm way that I do. But I mean, the Boku no Pico video was a lot of fun to make, just because I was like, oh, it's doing so many things wrong, I can really just kind of go off on it. Or response videos are something I really enjoy doing, even though I've only done 2 of them. Just because, again, I don't tend to watch videos I don't think I'll like. So it's, it was a lot of fun to, just go into that. So yeah, it's fun for me as well. So it's like, as much as I am gonna like be annoyed while watching the anime again, if that's the direction we end up going on the stream, it's also gonna be an enjoyable time.
私はあなたに残れと言ったんですのよ。ええ、ですが。仕方がありませんわね。
Okay. And I also I like this scene because there's a lot here that's being unsaid, where, Elise did tell him to stay because he has a family to worry about now. He's got his wife and he's got his sisters that he's looking after. And for those who don't remember, he had a bit of an emotional crisis trying to figure out what he needed to do. And he eventually told Aisha that he was going to go because, again, he's going to be away for a significant amount of time. That's causes a lot of emotional concerns. And I like how this face-to-face with Elise, he tells her that he's going, and she's like, I thought I told you not to. And he's just like, yeah, but I'm going. And then she kind of can immediately see all the things that he's really going through, and realizes that this is something that he does not take this decision lightly. It is something that is important to him, something he thinks he needs to do. And even though she probably still would argue that he should stay, she kind of realizes that, yeah, again, it's not a decision he's making lightly, so she's not going to fight it, because she can kind of see how much it's weighing on him. The Dune films made you feel bipolar enough to start gushing with. Okay, that's interesting. I don't have a whole lot of experience with Dune. I've never read the books. I think I've watched the first of the recent movies, but I don't really remember much about it. It's something I've been meaning to do, but yeah, again, if something really gets you excited about talking about it, that's great fodder for a video. And hi, Amir, good to see you.
ありがとうございます。私もベガリット大陸は初めてですけど、ざっと見積もって片道8ヶ月といったところですわね。俺の想定よりかなり早いですよ。さすが年の子。おだてないでくださいまし。それよりも問題は私の呪いのことですわね。
Yeah, that was okay, and I remember this scene from not this scene specifically, but this series of events from the books, and I really did find this kind of a fascinating look into the various characters because, I mean, as we saw last week, Elise is kind of initially planning on leaving Cliff, breaking up with him so that she can go on this trip because she feels like protecting her family is more important than building a loving relationship. Those are her priorities at the moment. But as we'll see, I'm sure, is that Cliff kind of isn't down with that, so they end up staying together. But of course, she does have her curse, which means she does have to have sex. She can't go 16 months without sex, and Cliff is not joining them. So they actually kind of had an agreement where she will contract sex workers, and that's how she'll kind of get her fix, in a sense, and she'll do it basically the minimum necessary to function. And again, she basically makes it just a business transaction. There's no actual seduction going on. So I gotta say, I mean, it's one of those things that logically I can understand it on all sides. But if I was in Cliff's position, I don't know that I could do it. Oh, you finished Rants 3? It depends. Is it with the remakes or the original? Because I think both are quite good. I haven't finished the remake yet. I'm working on it, but I mean I played the original Rants 3 ages ago. Both I think were actually pretty good, even though the original's gameplay wasn't all that great, but the writing more than made up for it, in my opinion. Yeah, Rants is a fun time.
旅の間、俺とエリナリーゼさんはしない。え、そうですわね。クリフ先輩が作ってる魔道具は使えませんか？呪いを緩和できるでしょ。
Yeah, remake actually has good gameplay, so that's good.
クリフに旅のことを話さなくてはなりませんわ。
Yeah, and yeah, I'll say 5D. I liked 5D, even though it has its issues. And 6, I think, is actually very good. Just Sunders, make sure that you get the Tada patch for Rant 6, because Rant 6 has really good core gameplay systems, but the vanilla version of it has like really shitty balancing, and legitimately the numbers tweaks and little quality of life fixes that exist in the Tada patch actually fucking fix it. Let's see. Is that a good translation? I don't speak Japanese. My subtitles had Rudy say an age brings wisdom line. Elena say don't provoke me like it was near you're getting your flick territory. I'll be honest. My Japanese is not good enough to be able to answer that. I can pick up some words and phrases here and there. So I really cannot, except for some really basic stuff, I can't really comment on translation decisions.
まだ話してないんですか？ちゃんと話しましょう。別れ話ではなく、これからのこと。そうですわね。
And I also do like how Rudy kind of immediately takes what he's learned in these recent times and is able to immediately kind of help Elise, who he kind of sees a similar struggle that he would have had back in the day, where he realizes, oh, you gotta learn to rely on people, learn to trust them, learn to share your burdens. Because that's something he just learned, but he's like, I can pass this on. So, yeah, I like this.
向こうのトラブル以下では2年はかかる。挨拶回りだけはしっかりしておこう。
どうぞ。何？いつもと時間が違うけど。
実は一つ残念なお知らせをしに来ました。
残念なお知らせ？
旅に出ます。ベガリット大陸の迷宮都市ラパンまで。往復で約2年ほど。
ベガリット迷宮と白パン2年
Yeah, and that's also got to be an interesting
申し訳ありません。でもどうしても行かなけ
yeah,
れ
it's
ば
got
な
to
ら
be
ない
an interesting series of things going through Nanahoshi's mind at the moment, because let's not forget that she had fairly recently had some pretty major breakthroughs in her research. And a large reason that her research is progressing as well as it is, not breakthrough aside from the multi-layered stuff, that's obviously important, but even aside from that, we got to consider the fact that she has access to basically an infinite mana reserve, or functionally infinite, with Rudy, because he just has his Laplace aspect, which, again, I'm still so annoyed they skipped the part of Bodigatti telling Rudy about Battle Aura, because that's such an important thing. I imagine they'll explain it kind of alongside the Laplace aspect explanation, but it still annoys me. But yeah, and that's the thing. She doesn't want to lose her source of mana, because that's kind of her key home, and home is her entire obsession at this point. I mean, but there's also the fact that she seems to have developed a friendship with Rudy. She's not great at displaying it, but they do have a bit of a bond going on. They do. I said this before, but I do believe that Nanahoshi is kind of fumbled by Rifujin. I think there's a lot about her he could have done better, and I think it's, again, comes down to the fact that he tried to do too many things in the story and just didn't have the space to let it all breathe and actually let the stuff come to a resolution. So yeah, and but they were initially, like they mentioned that they did become friends. Like in the books, they did kind of develop a friendship, and then it's just kind of later on when Rudy was doing other stuff, and that's when Rifujin kind of forgot about her. Then when she became relevant to the story again, Rudy was just like, oh yeah, we haven't really interacted much, we kind of drifted apart, which, yeah, it is what it is. But at this point, they're probably, calling them friends might be a bit of a stretch, but they are definitely friendly. So she's not only losing her mana battery, she's also losing a friend.
2年
では失礼します。
待ちなさい
Although, it's one thing, it's from her perspective also, if we just thinking purely of the pragmatic side of things. She doesn't know how long she really has to get things done. The timetable is actually a lot lower than she really thinks, because she doesn't realize that the mana will actually poison her. That's something that'll happen a lot later. That could arguably be a little spoilery, but it's also, I mean, it's the premise to a series of events. It's not actually telling about how that ends up progressing the story, how that concludes and all that. But the fact that she hasn't aged at all, she probably has the assumption that she has a very long time. So while a 2-year delay is uncomfortable for her, I don't know. It also seems like it probably wouldn't be that big a concern, because if you're not aging, it would most likely take something to outright kill you, as opposed to, dying of old age. So that's probably another thing that's kind of processing in her head, where, especially when, she's a very logical person. I think she's a little autistic, where all these considerations are probably things she's thinking of.
Look.
これは
世界各地にある転移魔法陣の場所を記した地図よ
And that right there is another big deal, where so that's another big deal, because again, there's kind of multiple influences going into that decision, because I mean, that's a big thing for her to give him. Like that's a secret that she is not necessarily allowed to divulge to anyone. And this shows kind of two things. One is that it shows that she actually does have a decent degree of trust in Rudy. Like, she trusts that he will not screw her over on this, because if he does, bad things could happen to her. But also, it's a consideration of, hey, this will actually make his journey a lot faster. So, she benefits from it as well. So it's an interesting kind of dueling motivations here.
お前場所は覚えてないって。
口止めされていたのよ。ラパンという町の名前は確かに聞いたわ。この転移魔法陣の近くにあるバザールから北へ1ヶ月ぐらい移動すれば。
Okay. Oh, okay. That is kind of neat that they have what looks like Japanese written on there again. Because she's Japanese, she wrote in that.
たどり着けるって。
Yeah, that's true. That's
間に合う。シルフィーの出産に。
Yeah.
あまり言いふらさないでよ。転移魔法陣は禁術だから国に見つかったらすぐに潰されちゃうわ。
ありがとう、七星。
And actually, it's actually kind of neat based on it's actually kind of cool to see how the teleportation circle taboo is in context after having read Old Dragon's Tale. Because that kind of... I don't know if the origin of the ban on teleportation comes from that series of events, but it would make a whole lot of sense.
私は恩を返しただけよ。早く戻ってきて研究を手伝ってよね。
はい。
Yeah, and that's, Nanahoshi being just a little bit tsundere. Is there no skip? Okay, I don't know why there's no skip intro button, but whatever. It was first banned by Millis. Yeah, that kind of tracks. I wouldn't be surprised since teleportation was primarily used by really powerful individuals before, more later time, but a lot of the most powerful people who could use it were not humans. They were like dragons and demons and stuff like that. And let's see. Travels would have been before or after she was deposited in Asura to learn human tongue. I believe that would have been after. I think if I'm remembering correctly, she started off in Asura and kind of planted her roots there for a bit. I think Orsted was, just kind of hanging around while she was learning, and then took her on a journey afterwards, where she eventually ended up in Renoa. That, if I'm remembering correctly. And Amir, that's what I'm thinking as well, but I also don't know, because the events of Old Dragon's Tale happened so long ago, like thousands of years before the start of the story, so it's hard to say for sure.
さんを助けに行こうと思う。
わかった。家のことは任せて。
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Rudy is doing like everything that is anti-Millis, at least anti-Millis doctrine. Like there's a lot of things he's doing that's not exactly kosher for them. I mean, the teleportation circle is definitely a big part of it. He also does have his. I mean, the multiple wives is a factor as well. But it seems to be one of those things that's like frowned upon more than outright forbidden, in a sense. Because I mean, it's funny because Sylphie is a follower of Millis, but she also just completely accepts that his multiple wives in the end, because circumstances are kind of led in that direction. And also, even look at Zenith. Zenith is a very devout follower of Millis, and she was able to accept Lilia as a second wife. Even though, it's not quite the same as her relationship with Paul, but again, it does seem like Millis followers, despite having a prohibition on polygamy, they don't seem to be super... It's not like that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, teleportation circles is another big thing. Also, Rudy's friendliness with demons. The fact that he married a demon, and that he's friends with Ruijerd, who is not just a demon, but he's a superd. While again, there's that's part of the conflict that's going to be in the Millis, where there's the kind of the fundamentalists who hate demons and want them eradicated. Then there's the reformists who want to develop peaceful relationships with demons, but they're still not going to really like demons because it is in the Millis doctrine that demons are bad and they need to be eradicated, all that stuff. So all these things are kind of like, Rudy's not really on board with the whole Millis thing, and they're probably not on board with him. And yes, that's also true, Alan. Zenith had some funny, there were some funny moments with Zenith and Sylphie. I really like how, in the books, I hope they adapt this, where after Rudy marries Eris, Zenith kind of just slaps the shit out of Rudy, and he's like, okay, I promise, that's the last one. And yeah, and if there wasn't a Laplace, Rudy and Millis with the enemies, possibly.
突然いなくならないって約束守れなくてすまない。
守ってるよ。全然突然じゃないしね。どれくらいかかるのかな。2年くらい。
実は七星の協力で転移魔法陣を使わせてもらえることになった。だから出産までには戻れると思う。
転移って大丈夫なの？
And I also really like that, how, again, Sylphie is a follower of Millis. Millis bans teleportation. That's like something that's verboten to them. But I also do love how he mentions teleportation, and her first reaction is that safe? It's great. Yeah, that's also a great moment, Alan.
大丈夫。絶対に帰ってくるから。Aisha.
As far as I remember, she's just not super devout. Like, she's not like Zenith, where Zenith, despite having kind of led the religious theocracy there and the strictness of her religious upbringing. I mean, I if I'm remembering correctly, I do remember her being shown as being a believer in Millis, but again, she doesn't really do a whole lot about it.
大丈夫だと思う。
ダメだと思ったら頼れそうなやつに頼
And
む
again, that's like I've been saying even today. One of the things Rudy has just recently learned is that he can rely on people. He can lean on the people around him, get help when he needs it, and he's already just trying to pass that off to all of his loved ones, trying to teach them that lesson he just learned. And he's now kind of passing it on to Aisha, saying, hey, you don't have to take on everything alone. You can ask for help and it's okay.
何でも一人でやろうとするな。
はい。
ノル。
はい、兄さん。
シルフィーやアイシャがいっぱいいっぱいだと感じたら助けてやってくれ。
はい。
そうだ。子供の名前だけでも行く前に決めておこうか。
名前ってルディ。お兄ちゃん、なんでそういうこと言うの？兄さん。旅に出る前に子供に名前なんてつけたら帰ってこられないよ。
しまった。この世界の死亡フラグだったか。
Yeah. And again, and as much as I do like the little tangents in his mind, the anime it feels a little off in the anime, like a bit of a tonal break, just because you don't see how just non-stop that type of logic and thinking is.
子供の名前は帰ってきたらつけることにして。
Okay. Okay, so I'm wondering why that was the case. That I thought that, because I'm sure there was something that made me think that she was a Millis follower. It might have been the fact that she expressed some sort of surprise that Rudy wasn't a follower of Millis. Although then that might also be because she knows that his mother is a devout Millis follower.
"旅立ちが決まったので、知り合い全員に挨拶をした。あれ以来バーディーガーディには会ってないが、まあ元気にやっているだろう。ジーナス教頭には休学願いを出し、天意とベガリット大陸にまつわる本、それぞれの貸し出し許可をもらった。万が一の保険だ。
And I love the setup here because that book becomes very relevant. Yeah, Aisha was having a good time. I mean, I don't know. Aisha at this point in time is probably still a little bit of a brocon, so I don't know. It kind of probably gets her going a little bit.
旅の計画はこうだ。 ここから1週間で
Because I don't think they ever actually say when specifically Aisha's infatuation with Rudy kind of dies down to the, or at least becomes to the point where it's not really overpowering. But, you know, it's one of the things where it doesn't take all that long for her to realize, oh, I don't actually have a shot here, and kind of puts that out of her mind.
転移魔法陣のある森へ行き、そこからベガリット大陸へ転移し、約1ヶ月かけてラパンへ向かう。そして迅速に家族を助け、同じルートで戻る。準備は整った。
Yeah, exactly. The squeak is great.
ルーです。準備は良くて？
ええ、問題ありません。
ルーです。まだ未完成だが、なんとかここまで小型化できた。伸縮性があるし、この上から着衣しても問題ないはずだ。
Again, I still find it hilarious that the relic that suppresses Elenalise's curse is literally a chastity belt.
リーゼ、帰ってきたら式を挙げよう。呪いはまだ解けてないけど、二人で家を買って一緒に住もう。今までそうしなかったから不安にさせてしまったんだろう。口だけじゃないかって。
クリフ。
Yeah, and again,
私は黙っていこうとした。
And again, I love all the little moments with Elenalise here. How, again, everything she does, you can see that she, despite, like, you know, the fact that people around her are actually accepting her, she, again, feels like the behavior she exhibits as the result of her curse just poisons her existence. And it's, you know, it's just one of those things she constantly feels self-conscious and scared about. And every time people like Cliff, especially Cliff, but even, you know, Sylphie and Rudy as her new family are kind of like accepting her, showing her that they don't care about that. You know, it just kind of breaks her a little bit.
ひどい女ですのよ。
結婚式はミリス式になるけど、いいか。リーゼはミリス教徒じゃないけど。
クリフ、愛していますわ。この世で誰よりも。
ルディ。
シルフィ。
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, like, one thing is, I will say this series of events made me respect Cliff a whole lot, because, again, you gotta consider the fact that while Elenalise's curse is significantly suppressed by the device, we have to also remember, doesn't suppress it enough so that she can just kind of power through this entire journey. So he has to be, like, accepting of the fact that she ends up sleeping with a prostitute along the way. And I'll be honest, like, if I was in Cliff's position, I don't think I'd be okay with that. And even though I know that would not be, you know, it's not logically cheating because she is not doing it out of any reason other than necessity. And of course, they kind of worked through it ahead of time. So, like, I'm not trying to say that Elenalise did anything wrong, but, like, yeah, I don't know if I'd have the self-confidence to, you know, be accepting of that the way Cliff does. So, like, that's, like, just reading that as, like, on a personal level, I really respected his strength of character at that point. Even though, yeah, he's a fictional character, so. Like, I think that, like, really just showed how much he had grown up since his introduction with Eris.
兄さん、何も心配しないでください。頑張りますから。お兄ちゃんもご分を。
シルフィー、大丈夫。ルーデウスは私が守りますわ。きちんと出産までに戻りますわよ。
Yeah, I also like that moment too because, you know, Elenalise, again, I think Elenalise is a lot more emotionally intelligent than she lets on sometimes, and I think a lot of that is just kind of her poisoned by her experiences, where she doesn't immediately hate the person that she has become, but she, you know, she doesn't think highly of herself. But also, you know, she kind of has shunned emotional connection, but I think she gets people a little bit better than she thinks she does. And I really like how, you know, she kind of, again, she can tell that Sylphie is really worried about Rudy, is scared, and she, you know, she decides to give her a little bit of comfort, saying, I'll protect him, even though, realistically, Rudy is probably the stronger combatant of the two. Even though, actually, Elenalise is no slouch herself. Like, she's got power, and she's also a lot of experience, but still, I think Rudy's just raw magical ability is probably better. How much of Elenalise's history is in the mainline books? How much do you know? I don't remember specifically, but I don't know. I mean, I know that I don't think you actually get all that much in the way of details, at least not that we haven't already learned at this point, where, she kind of got kicked out of her of her home when she first woke up because of her curse, and that she kind of been wandering since,
心配無用
except for when she would settle down to raise a kid.
行ってきます。
いってらっしゃい。
Oh, really? They skipped book 11 entirely? Yeah, so, okay. Yeah. I gotta say, those are some, like, heavy-duty horses. Those are, like full-on pack animals, not, like, just travel animals. Yeah, and I actually do like little moments like that, showing Rudy dropping down, 6 to 10 feet. Because with context from the books, knowing that he doesn't have a battle aura, that's actually just his physical prowess, his training paying off when he does stuff like that.
この石碑ですわね。
七星の情報と一致します。間違いないでしょう。結界を解除します。その竜はただ信念にのみ生きる。高層たるカイナからは何者をも逃れることはできない。2番目に死んだ竜。最も儚き瞳を持つ緑銀鱗の竜将。
Oh man, those
清流帝シラードの名を借り、その結界を今。
Okay, though that in the context of Old Dragon's Tale, that incantation actually has some hidden layers to it. That's neat.
まさに遺跡という感じですね。
たまに迷宮がこんな感じですわ。念のために罠は注意してくださいまし。
了解です。
怪しいですわね。
行きましょう。
これが転移魔法陣ですの？
おそらくそうでしょう。確認してみます。
I do love the little underlighting effects they give to the magic in this series, because it just gives it kind of that unnatural look to it that makes it exciting. And yeah, you might have a point there, Thomas. It's hard to say if that was deliberate or not, or it might just kind of be her expressing how much she values him, because Cliff is, again, the first person in a very, very, very long time to accept her for her, and to actually show her that unconditional love, and that kind of like completely changed her mindset around everything, where it kind of like stopped her wandering in her tracks and kind of got her to the point of maybe she can actually be a family woman. And again, I love how they're setting this book up ahead of time, because of having interesting, bits of teleportation information, and how it actually ends up being an account of the teleportation labyrinth that they're going to. Again, it's nice that they set it up early on, and they set it up in a way that it's not even obviously a Chekhov's gun, because it seems like it has a purpose ahead of time.
シルフィーとフィットワリを転移事件について調べていた時に見つけた本だが、まさかこんなところで役に立つとはな。
お互いに触れながら上に乗るだけでいいそうですよ。どうしました？
いえ、私転移には少々嫌な思い出がありまして。
嫌な思い出くらい俺だってありますよ。
そうでしたわね。
さて、行きますか。
え？
Yeah, and I also do like this series of events, because it does actually do a lot to develop the bond between Rudy and Elise. who are characters who it feels like in other scenarios would not make a whole lot of sense to make
そのようですね。
to be super close to one another.
一応戻れるか確かめておきますか。
私が行きますわ。万が一あなたがいなくなった時、パウロに報告するのはごめんですわ。
わかりました。お願いします。
So I remember this scene from the book. Like it's one of those things that it doesn't have a whole lot of immediate plot significance, but it is just a cool world building moment to realize that they're kind of just exploring just the fact that the teleportation circles take some time to function. You know, it's not an instant teleport. And I do like that just because it doesn't really affect much, but it just makes the world feel so real. The fact that, oh yeah, there's a delay here. There are just things happening because that's just how they happen. Yeah, I'll be honest. I think a lot of the Mushoku Tensei anime, I think probably the biggest complaint I have about it is the stuff that they skip over or they rush through. I mean, if I was in charge and, you know, I was the dictator of the Mushoku Tensei anime, I would have probably had them take longer for each section of the story. Like, instead of having it be 4 episodes per book, roughly speaking, I probably would have had like 6 or 7. I don't think that would have been a negative. I mean, I get that some people don't appreciate like long form storytelling, like the slow paced stuff like I do. But yeah, it just I think they're kind of pushing through stuff a little too fast, but you know, overall they're doing a good job. It's just I think that's going to be a consistent problem whenever you adapt something long form like a text, like a book or something like that, to something like a TV show where runtime is a very real concern. That's always kind of gonna be a problem, and it's not like I don't know. I think that the ones that do it the best are the ones that tend to take a book and kind of spend a long time on each particular book. And I mean, and this is not a one-to-one comparison just because the Mushoku Tensei books are fairly short, since light novels are not very long. But like the Game of Thrones TV show, which while it did not end up being very good, it kind of lost the plot once they got past the source material. In the early parts of the show, which the ones that everybody kind of agrees were really good, they generally went 1 book per season. And, you know, so they had a lot of time to actually work with each story. So I think approaches like that tend to work really well. Aside from that, that's, I think, why a lot of adaptations tend to kind of have issues. It's just because the pacing, the realities of pacing are different between mediums.
来れましたわね。
少し遅かったですね。
そうですの？すぐ戻ってきたつもりですけど。
タイムラグがあるのか。
何にせよ、戻ってこれるなら問題はないでしょう。
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've never read the Eminence and Shadows books, but I have seen the anime, and I thought it was a very enjoyable experience. I mean, I could tell it was basically a loving parody of isekai, and it was so dumb in all the right ways.
どうやらちゃんとベガリット大陸に着いたみたいですね。
砂に埋まってはいるが、ここも遺跡なんだろうな。内側からは見渡せるが、外からは干渉できなくなる魔術なんだろうか。
Funny little side note. I actually ended up watching in one of my videos. I can't remember what video it was on, but it was one of the ones with kind of a. It actually might have been a Mushoku Tensei video that I made, where one of the comments actually like genuinely referenced Eminence and Shadows as an example of what a protagonist should be. The protagonist should be, you know, badass and confident and capable. And I'm thinking, you know, Eminence and Shadows is literally a parody. Like, come on. I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny, but yeah, I mean, I do like Eminence and Shadows. It's just it's an experience. Like, I feel like it's one of those ones you kind of have to have seen or experienced other isekai for you to fully appreciate it. Kind of like with Konosuba as well. Like that's one that kind of plays on a lot of the isekai tropes and does things on itself. And yeah, I agree. The jokes do kind of write themselves there.
どうします？少しでも移動しておきますか？
日も暮れかけてますし、大した距離は稼げませんわ。少し早いけど、今日はこの遺跡で休んでおきましょう。
I will say that always kind of interested me, where they mentioned they can't travel because it's nighttime, and I know when it comes to deserts, it's generally the day is very, very hot and the nights tend to be very, very cold. I would imagine it probably makes more sense to travel at night, because you can keep moving to try to kind of counteract the cold, and also you're not kind of okay. And granted, it wouldn't really matter for these two since Rudy's a mage, he can conjure water, but you don't have to deal with dehydration as much if you just shelter during the day. I don't know. I would probably and heat also can kind of sap your strength, so I don't know. I probably would have if I was there. Oh, monsters at night. That also could be a concern. Although I will say that how powerful Rudy and Elise are, especially together. There's the question. Okay, yeah, you guys are probably right. I just don't really remember that. So yeah, I'm thinking a little bit too much of real world logic. So yeah, okay, but yeah, it makes sense that monsters come out at night. Although I think that these two are capable enough that can almost be a non-issue. Although, it probably would slow them down either way, even if it's not going to actually be dangerous. Because I think at this point, any standard monster is something that Rudy and any reasonably capable ally he's with are not going to be having any issues with. I like the music here, like the deserty music. Yeah, that's true. Navigating in the desert would be tough, just because. I mean, you could pathfind with the stars. I mean, you could also anywhere the sun is, you can also have a rough gauge of the direction you're going in as well, since sun rises in the east, sets in the west. At least here in the real world. I don't know if it's different in Mushoku Tensei worlds, but I don't know. Yeah.
いかんいかん。まだ大丈夫かと思っていたが、少し溜まっていたようだ。頭がもやもやする。
Yeah, and again, I love there are also moments like this are setting up the later events with Roxy, because he's realizing that as much as Rudy is not the same type of indiscriminate pervert like he was early on, because a lot of that was kind of tied to his trauma and the fact that he kind of interpreted positive emotions sexually and all that stuff. I've been on that rant several times. I'm not going to completely reiterate it right now since it's not super relevant. Just the fact that Rudy is not the same type of pervert. He doesn't have the same type of attractions that he did at the time. He lost a lot of his paraphilias, things like that. But despite that, he is still a fairly lustful character. He does have a relatively high libido for the rest of his life. Like, that's just kind of how he is, which... it's hard to say how much of that is the remnant of his old life and how much is that's just how he is. It could go either way. But I love how the fact that he's found a loving sexual relationship, and then he is now kind of at a point where he can't really expel that, and it's actually causing him difficulties. Like, he doesn't really have that kind of experience controlling that after having not had to control it. So now he's like, but also it's showing how much of a moral conviction he has, how much he realizes, like, oh no, I can't do this. This would be wrong, and how much it's fucking with him. So that actually sets up the stuff with Roxy really, really nicely, because on top of all those considerations, the fact that his inhibitions are weakened at that point because of how bad he's feeling, and also the fact that he had actual, like, loving emotions contributed to that. And yeah, it's hard to say when exactly the the thing is, his paraphilias, specifically, I'm talking about his attraction to children, although, that's not exactly relevant here. Because that is something I noticed, especially throughout the time period I'm thinking more of the book specifically, since I don't think the anime really goes into it, because they kind of toned down that element of Rudy. But the time period, that happened throughout season 1 is kind of what I'm thinking of from the books, where, again, he started out, literally the first line of the book, of the books, talks about him jacking off the lolly porn. And then and I'm not conflating 2D lollies and real children. Rudy was just kind of in the position where he would probably fuck anything with a pulse, and the pulse may be optional. So, but then, he did have some attraction to Sylphie and Eris when he was younger. And then he slowly started to kind of develop his relationships, come to grips with himself, start to kind of move on from his various traumas. And as he was doing that and started to realize and kind of accept happiness that was non-sexual, he started to stop directly associating a lot of these feelings with sex. But he still kind of had himself conditioned in some ways to do that, with the example I've given on multiple occasions, but I think it's a very good example. And the reason I think I harp on about this is because it's one element that I don't see a lot of people talking about. Even people who I know are very, very smart and who really do appreciate and understand Mushoku Tensei seem to miss just how important the sexual thing is as far as Rudy's psychology goes. But I remember when he rescues those beast children from the slavers before the Great Forest arc. And in the books, he feels very protective over them. He just rescued them. They're clinging to him. They're crying. They're scared. They're running into the powerful figure who's going to protect them. And he feels some kind of way about that. And part of himself is like, normally I would be aroused by this. And he was a little bit aroused because that was actually what they smelled on him. But the fact that he was aroused made him very uncomfortable. He couldn't even articulate it, but he felt just wrong about it. Yeah, exactly. Like what you said. And I don't know how this will come across on screen, but like the second you said he feels wrong is when I said it, so we said it at the same time. But it didn't feel right to him, and he didn't understand that was because he is starting to kind of have a healthier understanding of sexuality, but he hasn't kind of completely broken away from that paraphilia. So it's not just like, ooh, lust that he's feeling. It's some lust, but also just his logic and actual conscience is kind of fighting him on that. So I feel like it's kind of his paraphilias kind of get less and less as time goes on. And it even eventually gets to the point where he is able to essentially confine his outward expressions of lust to the people he's in a committed relationship with. Not that say he doesn't have attractions after that, because, that's a natural thing. You can be in a committed relationship and still find people hot. That's a normal thing, but he's able to express himself sexually with his wives and keep it there. So, and I do believe also that by the end of this series, it's hard to say exactly when it happens, but he does appear to lose his attraction to children entirely. Like, I don't think that by the end of the story he has any lingering attraction to children, and he just, he has the correct emotional response to them, which is, the care and protectiveness as opposed to the lust that he was feeling early on. So yeah, so I think Rudy's still kind of in that point where he's still kind of coming to grips with the fact that he has this high libido. He is now in a position where, he's found that emotional closure as far as that goes. But now he's in the first experience of him not being able to actually kind of express that directly. And it's still kind of fucking with him. And of course, that is a great setup to Roxy. I remember this scene. And I like how this is also a continuing. And of course, this kind of is the reveal that the lust Rudy's feeling, the fact that he almost groped Elena Elise, it actually wasn't, it was not necessarily his fault for that. He was kind of being under the influence of this magic. But also at the same time, it was an amplification of his real feelings essentially.
サキュバスですわ。まったく嫌な匂いですわ。
Yeah, that's also true. I will one thing I will say is that I think Rudy is not nearly as funny in the anime as he was in the books. I mean, again, I think a lot of that is just down to the fact that the anime doesn't spend as much time in Rudy's head, so you don't get to see how much of his brain is basically nonstop memes. But like the fact that he would continually go on these tangents, he would, you know, get distracted by something sexual, you know, like a dog getting distracted by a squirrel, and how he would just constantly be making pop culture references. That was such a funny part of the books that I am kind of sad that, I mean, they're starting to lean into it a little bit, but not quite as much. So I don't know. I like both versions of Rudy, but I definitely prefer book Rudy. And actually, I don't think they're actually even incompatible. Even I think you could definitely see Rudy in the anime as being like that. We just don't hear it.
エリナリーゼさん、一回でいいんです。スケベしようや。
Bonk.
早く解毒なさい。
エリナリーゼさん、すみませんでした。
スケベしようや。
And honestly, and also as funny as that is, you got to think that the fact that he does actually cringe at what he said is actually a pretty solid marker of how much he's grown. But also, it actually does a lot, I think, between these two to show that Illinois, you know, she's teasing him about it, but she doesn't actually hold it against him. Like, she understands that it was not him really saying that. So, it's actually a good moment, good character work regardless. Okay, that was cool. Oh, that's gotta be. I mean, I get that. He's using magic, but like, I'll be honest. Like, I don't know if any of you have ever been like in a place where dust or sand is getting blown around. I'm just like seeing them have their eyes wide open like that, even though they're probably using magic. But like, it's getting all that shit in your eyes. It's like, ugh. Yeah, light over. Yeah, that's probably true, Alan. You're. Yeah, Arizona. I've been to Arizona once, and I really enjoyed it. But like, yeah, it was one of those times. Definitely dust and all that and sand and all that shit was like on like an 110-degree day. Was like, yeah, it was something. I live in New Jersey, and you know we don't. While we are no stranger to hot days, like it's, you know, I've had multiple times where it's gotten to 105 plus. It's yeah, Arizona was something different. Again, I know I mentioned it before, and I do tend to mention it every time we see a new setting. But I mean, and as much as I also am hearing that you guys are saying that Begarit is not as well done in the anime as a lot of the other regions, or as well as it's done in the books, again, I do love how the music and the style just changes every time they're in a new setting, and you know, it's a cool desert setting, and yeah, and that's true. Also, dry heat is definitely different. Although humidity also changes things. Like dry heat, it's dry heat is one of those things that feels like really intense. Like it's like directly hitting you in the face. Like humid heat feels just gross. It's and humidity also kind of multiplies. Not multiplies, but it's like a modifier onto the heat. So like if it's humid, it's gonna feel hotter than if it's dry. But dry heat also just really high dry heat is also just very unpleasant because it's like an oven basically. Yeah, And yeah, that's also true, Alan. Yeah, and again, the little nods to how Rudy is kind of really just into food like that, how he gets really excited when he has good food, and it's a nice little bit of a combination of character and world building where, even Nanaho she mentioned is like, the food here sucks. And that's just one of the kind of the few things that Rudy misses about his old life is some of the Japanese food he's used to. That's why, the whole funny thing about the egg on rice in the later parts of the story, or how anime completely skipped it over, but the fried chicken that he had made by the one character who will become relevant later. I'm not going to spoil it for the anime onlys, but that scene was so funny in the books. I can't believe they skipped it. Where he gets just so excited when he thinks he sees food that resembles something from his home life. And now he's also really liking the food in this desert culture, which, since these various cultures are inspired by real world cultures, this is probably inspired by actual Middle Eastern, North African type of culture. And those places tend to have very strong flavors in their foods. And it's one of those things where a lot of people will try it and they'll immediately kind of take it. It was something like that, Thomas. I remember it was something that sounded distinctly Japanese, but I think that's what it was. I can't remember exactly. It was, I don't know. I think it was something like that, but yeah, I don't remember exactly. But yeah, but it also makes sense that Rudy would come to a culture like this where they probably have a lot of spices and stuff in their food, assuming it is based on the real world, like a lot of the other cultural stuff is, and he just gets really excited because he finally has like this really flavorful food. Although that is also interesting because I know that, different palates and different cultures are different. Like there's there's a bit of like memes between, like Western food and stuff like Middle Eastern or types of food where, again, Middle Eastern and Indian food has a lot more of an emphasis on spice, and Western food tends to actually kind of have more delicate flavors. So when you're accustomed to one, the other can kind of be off. Like if you eat spicy stuff all the time, like Western food can taste bland because your taste buds are accustomed to strong flavors and actually desensitized because of it. And the reverse is kind of true, where the spices can be overpowering if you're used to more delicate. Delicate's probably the wrong word, but that's kind of like that. But I know Japan kind of, they kind of do a little bit of both, but a lot of their stuff can be fairly bland in general. Not that it doesn't taste good, but it's just, again, some of their foods have a lot of pretty subtle flavors to it. So it is actually interesting that somebody with that background takes to the Middle Eastern style food so immediately. Although, again, of course, just because you grow up eating one type of thing doesn't mean you won't enjoy the other. I mean, I grew up eating mostly Italian food, but I mean, I actually also really like strong flavors in my food as well when I try it. So, when I try like Mexican food, or I had Ethiopian food once that was really fucking good. But yeah.
どこにです？男あさりに先に寝ていて構いませんことよ。わかりました。
魔道具の効果で呪いの影響は弱まってはいるが、結局は未完成ということか。お互いのためにもゼニスを救出して早く帰ろう。
Oh, is it okay? Again, I haven't. Okay, so it's you're more Saffron. I mean, okay. I mean, I have not had a whole lot of experience with Middle Eastern food, so I mean, I'll default to your experience, especially since Amir sounds more like a name that would know, as opposed to my name, which is, my real name is Andrew, so that's like a fairly white name. So yeah, I'll trust it. But I mean, I still remember, I mean, not necessarily having spicy food the times I've had Middle Eastern stuff, but like definitely like strong flavors where a lot, not necessarily spicy, but spices. But again, I could be just completely misconstruing, or I could have had something that was kind of inspired by multiple cultures. Because I will also say, I think that as much as I do like experience the foods of different cultures, I think a lot of cultural blends are really good as well. Like a lot of times some of the best food comes from when multiple cultures kind of mix. Like, dude, Tex-Mex is fucking awesome. Okay, you're Turkish and Persian. Okay. Yeah, I am American. I grew up, born and raised in America. My ancestors are from Sicily, so Italian food, and my great grandparents were Ellis Island immigrants to America, so we kind of have the stereotypical Italian American cultural background. So that type of food is something I grew up in. We went to Italian restaurants. We had like my Italian grandmother would cook for us, that kind of thing. So very different flavor than stuff you would have in the Middle East. But also, I'm in like the best part of America for that type of food, so that makes me happy. Because, yeah, and that's the thing. For those who are not American, don't expect like certain, if you ever decide to visit, don't expect certain foods to be good universally. Like if you want Italian food, pizza and bagels, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, those are where you want to go. The Southwest is where you want to get Mexican food. The Midwest and the South, the Midwest is good for barbecue and stuff like that. Louisiana has its own food culture that like there's some really good stuff there. But yeah, different places have different specialties. So yeah, like I've had pizza outside of this little section of the world I'm in, outside of the Northeast, the tri-state area. It is not very good outside of this place in the world. Yeah, Italian foods that are that is true. Italian food fucking loves garlic, and that is something that does stick with me. Like one of the spice I use the most. I mean, calling it a spice is probably not the most accurate thing, but like I have garlic powder. I use a shit ton of garlic powder when I cook, and I also have just raw garlic that I chop up and put in stuff. And I'm not a very good cook, but garlic is the one thing I will use a lot of in excess at some points. And but yeah, garlic is like a very strong flavor, but I mean, it's a different type of strong than you would find in Indian or Middle Eastern or that types of food. It's, again, different flavor profiles, but yeah, I probably should not get this tangent because I'm going to get hungry because I haven't eaten yet today. Or, well, I haven't eaten like a meal today. I've had a few peanuts, but that's about it.
助かりますわ。魔力量が多いと頼もしいですわね。任せてください。最短距離で行けるなら出し惜しみしませんよ。伏せて。
Yeah, and I do love how a lot of these monsters are actually inspired by actual mythical creatures. Like, while a lot of the monsters are also just kind of unique to Mushoku Tensei, they have their own spin on things. It's cool that you also get to see things like griffins. Like that's cool.
グリフォンのつがいですわね。そっちは任せましたわ。わかりました。
来る。
And I will say, as much as I mentioned, haven't mentioned it in a while, but again, I do love how the aesthetics of Rudy's demon eye, how they really just kind of change things. Because, I mean, one thing I will say about Mushoku Tensei in general is I absolutely love the vibrant eyes that fucking everybody has. Even Nanahoshi, who's meant to be, just a regular Japanese person who's supposed to look like a regular Japanese person, she has these really like deep, rich charcoal eyes, which are not really that naturally colored, but it doesn't matter. But Rudy already started with that, having the deep, the bright green eyes that the vibrant green eyes that his family tends to have. Like you can see in Paul, and you can see it in Norn. But then the demon eye is a similar color, slightly different, and has the little ring on top of it. It's just a really cool visual. And again, that's another thing I really do like about Mushoku Tensei so far, and I really hope we see more of it, especially as we start getting to meet more and more powerful people, both as allies and enemies, just how they can use tactics to work together as a group, as opposed to just being, again, two strong people fighting alongside one another. But you see things like this, again, how she pins the Griffin's foot so that Rudy can have a clearer aim. Yeah, I agree. The fighting is very good, and I mean, it takes on a slightly different tone to the light novels, and I think both are very good. I think the anime does showcase the stuff that's actually verbally explained in the books. The fact that fights, because of how powerful everyone and everything is, everything kind of is like an explosion as opposed to anything drawn out. Because that's actually a big difference between Mushoku Tensei fights and real world, like medieval fights, where like a common thing in the real world was actually, the stuff you see in movies was actually not ridiculously common in medieval times, but the more realistic thing was that they would, if two people were kind of in a one-on-one fight to the death, a lot of times it would come down to who was able to kind of wear the other person down. It's not necessarily you get one clean thrust to cut their head off or to stab them in the heart. It was more like you cut them like 7 times and they end up bleeding out. But in Mushoku Tensei world, everyone is super powerful, and also healing is a thing, so you kind of have to focus on the big flashy finish. I do think the anime is selling that pretty well. I don't know if they're quite selling how much sense it makes, but it also doesn't really matter in that sense. But yeah, that's also true, Thomas. I'm talking in vast generalizations as well. So like, there's going to be a million different things that can affect that. I mean, one thing I do really like is it does seem like Mushoku Tensei, the Rifujin took thought into thinking, okay, how does this high-octane fantasy world differ from the real world, and how can I make that make sense? And I feel like that was one instance of why they're going for the fast, decisive finish, and again, that's because of healing magic and the fact that the magical abilities of everyone enables these flashy finishes to be practical. But also, I like how he kind of had built-in explanations for why nobody uses spears, even though spears were very, very popular in the real world for a very long time, because, especially in organized combat, because the reach is just, like, reach is something that people don't realize is really important in a fight. And that's why, even though, you don't have as much versatility with a spear as you do with a sword, you still, the fact that you can force people to keep your distance, that incurs a very real advantage. And that's why, until ranged weapons kind of overtook everything and melee combat kind of stopped being a main thing, spears and such were most popular. Hell, even in World War I, they were attaching fucking bayonets to their rifles. So they basically had spears. Yeah, and again, different types of spears also. But yeah, the ones that did have the kind of little guards on the things could actually do stuff like that as well. World War II. It was a thing in World War II. But I think it was at that point kind of starting to fall out of favor. Although I mean, it was still a feature in a lot of combat up until fairly recently. I know it was also a little bit of a thing in Vietnam as well. But I mean, again, it's kind of, we've gotten to a point where generally, if you're in close quarters, you probably are either in a situation where that reach won't actually do anything, or you already kind of fucked up and allowed them to get too close. Yeah, that's true. I mean, also, things like World War I, remember, trench warfare was a thing at that time, so there were a lot of times where you would kind of be put in a position where you would right up against the enemy, which nowadays we kind of like want to avoid that, because that really kind of adds an element of uncertainty to things. But yeah, so I like how, spears are just such an important thing in the real world, but they mentioned, the Super basically initiated a taboo on spears because they basically like genocided everyone with the spears. And now everybody kind of thinks, spears are an evil weapon, we're not going to use them. And they also softly implied why swords are so popular, because, again, in the real world, we think of swords as just the thing everybody used in medieval times, but really that wasn't the case. because swords, while they are a very good weapon if you're good at them, they require a disproportionate amount of training compared to other melee weapons. Like if we're talking about spears specifically, again, you just kind of give all your men a pointy stick and they're going to do all right. But even besides that, weapons like axes and mauls, hammers, flails, that kind of thing required a lot less training to get over the skill floor, to be actually like competent with it and actually pose a real threat with it. Whereas swords actually required like a decent amount of finesse and skill and training that, especially on an army-wide level, you couldn't necessarily get that with all your people. And also, a lot of people also just kind of fought with farm implements as well. And yeah, that's also, yeah, swords are pistols and spears are rifles. Yeah, sort of. That's kind of true. I mean, I don't think it's a 1-to-1, but there is something to that. Yeah, and also, I mean, like the thing I'm talking about, like a skill floor, is also a case why crossbows ended up overtaking regular bows, like longbows, because in isolation, in a lot of scenarios, being able to actually fire a longbow is actually more versatile than being able to fire a crossbow, because you can fire them faster, you can arc the arrows in ways you can't arc the bolts. The bolts admittedly were better at punching through armor, but again, you had a lot more accuracy and versatility with a longbow, but it requires so much more training. Whereas with a crossbow, you can teach somebody to do that in a couple days, and they'll be pretty good. So a lot of times the practicalities of getting a lot of people up to a fighting stuff did. Yeah, that's also true. I mean, Romans were also kind of unique as far as armies go, partly because they were so highly militarized that, they really trained their soldiers really, really well. Kind of like how modern armies will nowadays, like it's the fact that modern armies do have a pretty extensive training with weapons that they use, so that they can become competent before they actually go into fights. But Romans had that type of training, but also Romans were unique in the fact that they were very aware of the stuff that worked well, and so they incorporated elements of their enemy's arsenal into themselves, where they saw a weapon or an armor or a war machine, and they said, that was pretty effective. Let's take that and improve upon it and utilize it for our own stuff. So they were, I mean, I will say, for as much as it is a meme, as like, every guy thinks about the Roman Empire at least once a day, they were in many ways very ahead of their time. And especially in warfare, I think they kind of, something about how they set everything up. Like, I think they had a couple of like tactical geniuses in like the early stages of establishing the Roman military culture. So yeah, it's like Romans, like, yeah, you can talk about the Romans because they were a major part of history, but like they were almost kind of an exception to how things were.
どうぞ。焼けましたよ。あなたの味付け結構好みですわよ。そりゃどうも。
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's also kind of that's also true. It is also a factor that crossbows tend to be a little. I would say crossbows are probably a little easier to mass produce, just because I don't think they require the same level of artisanship as like a really good bow. But I mean, again, it's also going to depend on a lot of different factors, like what kind of resources you have access to, where in the world you are. So, like, different. I mean, do you happen to have access to the types of trees that have the type of bend that you need for a bow? Whereas crossbows tend to be pretty, like, well supported. They have like their designs so that they don't need that type of bend to it. So again, it's going to change stuff. But again, also the big reason was that, cost wasn't always the biggest concern. A lot of times it was the fact that, hey, you need to get 1,000 people up to fighting capacity quickly. With bows, you need like, dozens or hundreds of hours of training to be really good. With crossbows, honestly, you're gonna be okay within a couple hours of training. And the downsides tend to be kind of worth it for how easy it is to kind of mass produce and mass train soldiers with that, and that is a major concern in a lot of armed conflict. Like, I mean, hell, even in like most of history, the military weapons, especially like you think of during the U.S. Revolution, the Revolutionary War, where we got our independence from Great Britain, where we, the muskets and stuff at the time that everybody used, that the British Army used, was not actually the top of the line stuff. It was just what was the easiest to kind of equip a large army with. But like there were better guns that were available to wealthy civilians, and also there were just some of the naval weapons they had at the time were also kind of fucking crazy. Like, dude, they had fucking puckle guns, the Girondoni air rifle. There was some cool shit back then that people don't realize were there. Although, and then of course cannons were a thing as well. Cannons were fun. I think we need to bring back cannons. Like, I don't know. I hear about there was a politician back in the United States who was like a major abolitionist. Like his whole thing was he was an abolitionist and he would fight people about it. But it was Cassius Marcellus Clay. Yeah, Muhammad Ali was originally named after this guy, but he in his old age ended up getting a home defense cannon, and like that's awesome. We should have more of those. Like I don't know why that like fell out of fashion. I mean, I do know why, but I don't know. I feel like any impracticalities should be overwritten by the cool factor of having a home defense cannon.
エリナリーゼさん、お行儀が悪いですよ。
あら、ゼニスみたいなことを言いますのね。
母さんはそんなことを？
女の子なんだから、もっといろいろ気をつけてください。そういえば。
Okay, that's also funny. Like, I actually just seeing the Lilies do that actually does make me think of like the anime version of Zenith that we've seen, who's again a lot more bubbly and a lot more bouncy than light novel Zenith. That seems like exactly the kind of thing she would do. Oh yeah, and yeah, that's true. Black powder is not exactly the most stable of things. Although I imagine you could have a modified version that uses more modern combustion. Like, so instead of having black powder, I imagine you could kind of retrofit it to be something that can use like standard gunpowder, or maybe even have custom build like your own, like instead of having like regular cannonballs, you could essentially like scale up a round, like a firearm round, so that again it's like a cartridge that fires off a piece of metal as opposed to a full metal ball. Again, maybe it doesn't quite have that same cool factor as blowing a 24-inch diameter hole in somebody's chest, but it would be functional. Presumably, I don't know the physics behind it. I'm not a gunsmith.
16歳ぐらいですか？
右も左もわからない小娘で。
And I will say also, granted, my mind has been, but based on what we've been talking about in the daily streams, it's almost become kind of a running thing on those, that like every day I have to identify somewhere where the anime characters are very bad at gun safety. So guns have been kind of on my mind lately because holy shit, old anime, they did not have trigger discipline. Most of the time they did not have muzzle awareness. They were doing all sorts of crazy ass shit with those guns. Yeah. The trigger discipline and the Mushoku Tensei references are the things that have just become kind of standard. Like I think it was Mobile Suit Gundam that I think it was it, where one of the characters was holding a gun. I can't remember if it was that show or if it was one of the others, but she had her finger all the way through the trigger guard, like up to her second knuckle. I'm like, that is not how you hold a gun. What the fuck? I don't know. And again, I understand that it's because Japan does not have as much experience with guns as us in America, but like, I'm not even the biggest gun guy, but I know the basics, and I also think it's really important. I think everybody should learn the 4 rules of gun safety, even if you're in a country with almost no guns. I think it's an important thing to know, which, I'll just fucking say it right now. I mean, it's easy enough to look up because they're everywhere, but, first rule is treat every gun as if it's always loaded. Second rule is finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Third is know your target and what's behind it. And fourth is never point your gun at anything that you don't want to put a hole in. So, yeah, that again, any gun accident typically requires you to break 2 or more of those rules. So, yeah. Congratulations. Did you know that? You're actually like able to prevent like 99% of gun accidents. Basically, if there's no technical issue, if the gun doesn't like explode, follow those rules and you'll be safe.
パウロにナンパされて連れてこられましたのよ。
父さん、エリナリーゼさんに何か謝りたいみたいな感じでしたけど、何があったか聞いても？
聞かない方がいいですわ。あなたも父親の地上のもつれなんて知りたくもないでしょ。
聞きたくありません。
パウロのことだし、どんな愛憎劇があったのかなんとなく想像がつくな。
でもラパンに着いたらきっと謝ってくれますよ。
Yeah, and it's also kind of funny because Rudy can probably actually kind of have a general idea of what Paul got up to because he knows kind of the full extent of, you know, how bad Paul could get in his youth. Although I'm curious as to whether I don't know if they probably mentioned it in the light novels and I'm just not remembering, but I'm just wondering just because I get the impression that Paul was like actually just like kind of a total fucking menace before settling down with Zenith, and he probably was like a total asshole to be real. It's not just like, I mean, people saw good in him, but like, you know, he had yet to not be an asshole. So I mean, I imagine the bridges he burned were probably pretty significant. What are you doing, Mickey? Why? Sorry, I imagine you guys can hear the cat because that was actually quite loud. But yeah.
何を言っても許しませんわ。
But also, I think it's also an interesting way of putting that because I feel like Elise does end up forgiving him, but again, it's not because of what he says, it's because of what he does. Like, I think it's one of those things where I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who maybe is watching it for the first time with me, but the things that Paul ends up doing in these upcoming episodes, I don't remember if it's going to happen in these episodes or in the next handful of episodes because again, haven't watched the anime, just read the books. It's one of those things where it's kind of hard to not be at least kind of okay with him after all that.
役ですわね。
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that was pretty good. Let me see, is there? Okay, no, that's not an extra. So hey, I got a cat on my desk. I'm just gonna hold off until she kind of settles down, whether she decides to do that in a way that's not gonna block things or not. Let's just wait for this to load up as well. So yeah, I don't know if she's gonna end up talking to you guys, but yeah, we got a cat watching Mushoku Tensei with us. Nope, make it. Don't step on the fucking keyboard. Holy shit! What are you doing, Miki? Sorry about that. She's kind of being a little difficult. I probably should have doped her up before, like we did yesterday, because she actually left me alone at the time. But yeah, now she's kind of being. I don't know what she's doing. She's just very interested in what's behind one of my monitors right now. So she's just kind of being difficult. What are you doing? Miki, what are you doing? Okay. Hey, if you're gonna what are you doing? Why are you being so difficult today? If you're gonna be here, can you? Yeah, let me be, girl. Okay. It's just down there. See you later, girl. Sorry about that. She can be a little bit of a pain in the ass.
着いたはいいですが、今度は父さんたちを探さないとい
Yeah,
けない。
I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, it is funny the fact that cats are the only animal that's like socially acceptable to drug, but like yesterday, I gave her a decent amount of catnip, and she was just fucking like the chillest I've ever seen her. And although she kind of made up for it this morning, because today I was just. We've been in a bit of a power struggle lately. She's been trying to wake me up on her schedule. I've been trying to kind of say no. That's one area I need to set a boundary where I'm just like, no, I will get up when I get up. You will wait for me. So lately I've been kind of having to. She tries to meow a lot to wake me up. I get her into another room and close the door behind her. She really doesn't like that, but she's got to learn that she is not the boss as far as my wake up schedule because I need my sleep.
そんな時はギルドですわ。
Yeah. Yeah, that is a shame that they skip a lot of this because I do think one of the strengths of the books is the fact that they do have all these different areas. Yeah, they do have all these different areas feel like real areas. I'm also very curious as to what they'll do. I hope they show that Rudy speaking the fighting god tongue because there's some cool stuff there. I love the way this series handles language, so I'm just curious to see what the fighting god tongue sounds like. And yeah, and that's true. There's only so much. Yeah, you only has as much power as you give her. That is true. I don't know. I just try to, I let her have mostly free reign, but like, there's just a couple things where she, like operate within those boundaries, Cat, and you'll be fine. Which the big one is not waking me up. I have been able to teach her not to try to leave the apartment because that was a problem early on when I first adopted her. Another thing I got to get her is for some reason I have some dining chairs around the apartment. She really likes scratching those, and she knows she's not supposed to scratch them. When I catch her, she knows that she's in trouble, but I got to kind of teach her. And at some point, I might just cover the entire things with double stick tape for a while because that's one thing she doesn't like. That's how I got her to stop scratching the couch. But yeah, we have our power struggles.
さて、とりあえずパウルかギースのことを聞いてみますわよ。
聞けばわかるでしょうか。
ギースはこういうところに情報網を張っていますから、名前さえ言っておけばあとは向こうで。と、その必要もなさそうですわね。
なあ、頼むって。
Yeah, I also think I also love just in hindsight having read the books, seeing scenes like this, where where they just kind of happen to run into Geese when they're looking for him. It like really, how do I say this without spoiling anything? But like, it really makes you think when you realize, how easy this was for them to find him.
でかいの図体だけがよ。
ギース？
おお、エリナリーズじゃねえか。
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly,
Mr.
Alan. I really cannot wait until Turning Point 4 happens, because then it just opens so much that I can talk about on stream, because and anyone who knows Turning Point 4, they'll know why there's so much I can't talk about, because I mean, even though I did frame this as, I'm watching this, having read the books, I'm talking about it with that perspective in mind. I still don't want to be the person who ruins that moment for an anime only.
なことはね、むしろ早すぎるぐらいだ。っていうか、手紙出したのはまだ半年前だぜ。あ、もしかして手紙見てねえか。
そのことは後で話しますわ。ゼニスの方はどうなっています？
芳しくねえ、正直な。まあこっちも詳しくは後で話そう。
とりあえず父さんのところに案内してください。
おお、なんだ先輩だよな。ずいぶんでかくなったな。
ギースさんはお変わりのないようで。
やめろよこそばゆい。新入りでいいっての。
あら、ずいぶんと仲がよろしいのね。
Yeah, Geese is such a great character. Like, it's great. Like, he's great even now, but I know he's also great just as an overall part of the story because just I know how his character develops later on. He's still a great character. Then I think he's one of the better written characters in the entire series. I think.
に入ってた中だからな。なあ先輩。
ああ、懐かしいな。
と。
Why are you like this today? Why are you so loud? Why are you interrupting all the time?
思い出話をしてる場合じゃねえな。
What? Why? Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but Cat's being very loud today. Hey. Why are you being so difficult? You behave, I'll give you some treats later.
ウロのところに案内するぜ。
Oh, got a intro. Yeah, don't want copyright claims. Yeah, I am sad that they don't have the interesting stuff they were doing with the OPs like in season 1. Miki, don't scratch that. No. Sorry, she's got... You know what? Give me a minute. I am going to drug my cat. Mickey, come here. Okay, I am back. Cat's got a bit of the zoomies today, but catnip does kind of mellow her out, so that should work.
抑えてくれ。
約束できかねますわね。
先輩もだ。前みたいな喧嘩はやめてくれよ。
はい。
Oh yeah, that is interesting. I guess he doesn't the last time Geese had kind of interacted with these guys, it was when they were still fighting. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was also one of those things, I knew it was going to take about 10 seconds, so I figured it wasn't even worth the BRB screen. And I also imagine whatever you guys overheard was probably kind of funny, because she is a bit hyper today. And I don't know how much you guys can hear it, but when my cat runs from one room to another, she doesn't just run. She does like a little like low meow while she does it. So you can kind of hear her kind of making like almost like an engine noise as she runs. It's very funny, but like she's a crazy cat.
Rudy, 夢じゃねえのか。
本物ですよ、父さん。
Yeah.
お久しぶり
Yeah,
です。
and I love this this meeting in contrast to the previous meeting they had, where Paul still kind of down at the moment, and he was sleeping at the time as well, but different between him looking disheveled but reasonably healthy compared to the drunkenness he was beforehand. I mean, I think it's just an interesting world building thing, Thomas, that the fact that the succubi just changed the way things are out of nature. I don't know. I've always liked the ways that succubi can kind of influence a fantasy world. And granted, I've also lately been playing a game called The Last Sovereign, where succubi are actually like a major feature of that world, and they have their own culture and it kind of influences how things work. So it's something that has been on my mind lately, but I think it's neat. But yeah, so I do like this juxtaposition between their previous meeting and this meeting. Just again, how there's some similarities to it, but they also is in a much better place. And also, I do like how this girl here. Oh, I realized I just forgot to excuse me. I want to pull up my Epic pen so I can draw on the screen, because let's just wait for this to pull up. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. So like, yeah, we're talking about like this girl here. While the anime completely skipped over her whole deal, the fact that she was scared of men, scared of attention because she was sexually assaulted early on after the teleportation incident. Again, I like how she while still kind of timid and shy, definitely is less scared of Rudy now because it's shown she's going through some of her own personal growth as well. What the fuck? No. What
来てくれたのか。早いな。
少々特殊な移動方法で来ました。帰りに話すことになると思います。
ま、お前ならそういうこともあり得るのか。
And the music here is great. Like,
父さんはな、ダメなやつだ。
yeah, again, so it's like Paul is in a very low place emotionally, but it's like it's different from the last time where then he was kind of self-destructing. Now he's just kind of shutting down. And again, this is one of those things where Rudy, like, this is kind of thing Rudy like really empathizes with. This is the kind of thing he's experienced. This reminds him of both his past life and to the point where he shut down after Eris left him. So, you know, this is again something that like really has to cut him deeply.
こんな状態ならそれだけで俺が来た意味もある。
安心してください。俺が来たからにはもう大丈夫ですから。
ルーディ、お前大きくなったな。
大きくなりましたよ。もうすぐ子供も生まれるんです。だからあとは俺に任せてゆっくり休んでください。
子供?
Yeah, I gotta say that's one hell of a way to announce that he's gonna be a grandfather. Like just kind of dropping it out of nowhere.
子供の頃あんなに大きかったパウロが今は小さく感じた。
And that's a great line right there.
父さん、エリナ・リーゼさんは助けに来てくれたんです。父さんと顔を合わせたくないのを承知の上で。
I love just the way they draw out moments like this.
エリナ・リーゼ。
何ですの？
あの時は悪かった。
私にも非があったと思ってますわ。
Yeah, and I like that also because, again, we got to think about things from Elenalise's perspective. How the last time she saw Paul was before he settled down, because that was when kind of the impetus for his primary growth happened, to where he kind of like became a decent person, and then he even grew further than that when he interacted with Rudy and kind of got his shit together again there. Like he went through two major periods of growth in his life since last seeing Elenalise. So the fact that he goes up to her, apologizes, and like gets down on his knees to do so is like, she's like, it probably blows her fucking mind. Like she can't imagine Paul humbling himself like that because that was just not in his old character. So it's a really nice moment when you really think about the full context of things.
ありがとう、エリナ・リーゼ。
どういたしまして、パウロ。
でも、お前よく我慢できたな。もしかしてルーディとやっちまったんじゃねえだろうな。
まさか、クリフの魔道具で何とかしましたわ。
どれだ、クリフってのは。
私の旦那ですわ。
はあお前に旦那って、そんな物好きがいるのかよ。どういう冗談だよ、そりゃ。
父さん言い過ぎです。クリフは俺の尊敬できる友人ですよ。
And it is funny that Paul is like one of the only times Rudy is in a situation where he's the voice of reason. Maybe? I don't know. I don't remember, honestly, Thomas. Like, that's something I would believe, but I also don't remember.
マジか。悪かったな。今度紹介してくれよ。
ええ、あなたよりよっぽどいい男ですわよ。
何にせよ。ルーデウス。
And I like how even though kind of their initial animosity is resolved, that she's, you know, forgiven him in a sense, but I love how they're still kind of have that animosity between them. It's funny.
よく来てくれた。
家族なら当然です。
感謝はこれからですわ。
状況を説明する。ギースの情報によると、ゼニスはここより北に1日行ったところにある迷宮に囚われているらしい。
6年ずっとですか？
わからん。
命に別状？
わからん。
数年前、その迷宮で消息を絶ったパーティーにゼニスらしき人物がいたって話を聞いたんだ。
Well, I also see this is an interesting scenario just in hindsight, because one thing that you will learn later on that is not something these guys could have known is that this is actually not time sensitive at all. It's like as long as it takes to get to Zenith is how long they have, essentially. Like, you know, she's kind of in a period, like in stasis basically, so it doesn't matter. But and it also, just in hindsight, also makes me wonder, like, some of the what ifs, like what would have happened had Rudy not gone on this journey, because they probably would have been just stuck at a stalemate for a while, and who knows how that would have ended. Who knows how Rudy's stuff could develop, because I know that this does kind of lead to certain types of bad things happening on multiple levels, which I'm not going to really spoil here because some of it is past where the anime has gone. But also there's it's the thing is, the way we kind of know how things work, even though that particular bad thing would have been avoided, something bad also would have been in the picture as well, and we just don't know what it was. So it'd be curious to see what would have happened had Rudy not gone on this journey, because it changes everything.
さらに最近になってゼニスを迷宮の中で見たって話もある。
その迷宮ってのが古くて厄介でな。この1年迷宮探索のプロが4人も集まって半分も攻略できてね。情けない話だ。
Jeez, my cat is going fucking crazy.
黒人がおるのか。もしやお前さんがパウロの息子か？
はい。はじめまして、ルーデウスです。
I love Tallhand. He's great.
話に聞いていた通り、利発そうな男だな。
全員揃ったところで
Yeah, exactly.
話を続けるぞ。
Thomas, like, again, I'm so sad that the anime just completely cut out their backstory, because like that completely changes. Like it wouldn't take a long time to explain what they're all about, but like I think their story is very compelling, and also again there's a lot of storytelling due to the fact that how different they are now that we're seeing them again. It just, again, they're not major characters or anything, but oh, they were so good in the books. I don't know why anime just skipped over their story.
全員？
ちょっと待ってください。ロキシー師匠はどうしたんですか？嘘でしょ。
Yeah, that's also true,
1ヶ月
Thomas.
前迷宮で罠にかかって。
死んだんですか？
聞きたくない。だって彼女は一人で迷宮を踏破できる実力者で、水曜級魔術師で、俺の恩人で。聞きたくない。
いや、転移魔法陣を踏んで行方不明になっただけだ。まだ死んだと決まったわけじゃね。
おいパウロ、そりゃ無理だ。
And again, I love this right here because it's doing a couple things. The fact that they're once again doing the thing where all the sounds aside from Rudy's, thoughts get muted, which, great way to show his tunnel vision, but also the little zoom they're doing, which it looks kind of like a dolly zoom, which is actually, it's cool because it's one of those things you have to really deliberately do in animation. It's a cool moment right here. And it's also starting to slowly go out of focus as well. It's, again, a lot of care went into this moment here. And like we can tend to see with Rudy, somebody pulls him out of it.
すみません。話の腰を折ってしまいましたね。その迷宮というのはどういうところなんですか？
Yeah.
難易度 S 級。ここらでは最悪の迷宮の一つ。転移の迷宮だ。ち
ょっと待っててください。こ ここに転移の迷宮の奥深くまで侵入した冒険者の手記があります。
Yeah. Again, I love how they set up that book several times up to this point and made it look like it had already served its function in the story. And like on multiple occasions, and now, you know, it's like a Chekhov's gun that doesn't even look like a Chekhov's gun. It's really cool writing.
の役に立ちませんか？
なんでこんなもの？
大学から借りてきました。
ギース、確認してくれ。
じゃあ読ませてもらうぜ。
Those illustrations are really cool.
さすが先輩だ。これに書いてあることが本当なら第6階層までは攻略できたも同然だぜ。
Although I actually kind of find it funny how, you know, the translation has him calling him Rudy boss, but I love how the original Japanese has him calling him senpai, which, you know, it has a different connotation than boss, which essentially is like, you know, an older peer. So like, you know, if you're in school, somebody who's a grade or two above you, you could call senpai. But so it's funny to see Geese calling Rudy senpai, even though physically speaking, Geese is a lot older than him.
どうか。
ああ、知りたかったことがほとんど書いてら。
よし、全員が読み終わったらフォーメーションから決めていくか。
おう。
ルーデウス様と寝床を共にするのは初めてでしたね。
そうですね。
Yeah.
旦那様のいびきがうるさかったら。
Yeah, I'll agree. I mean, I think it's I mean, the way they kind of do things in the story here is, I don't really have a big problem with coincidence, because I mean, it's the coincidence here does not necessarily solve the problem, but it changes the dynamics of things, allows things to start moving in a different direction. So it's arguably it gets them into more trouble than they were in before. So, you know, there's an argument to be made there, but also, I mean, the thing is, the thing that gets me is that, you know, this book was like meticulously set up ahead of time, and it served a unique purpose in the story before all this happened. And I mean, I will say you can argue that it's a little bit clunky how it just suddenly is like, oh yeah, I do have that book that can solve here, but like I do feel like it made a little bit more, it felt a little more natural in the books. But I mean, also again, having this stuff set up well ahead of time and having it serve a unique purpose in the story, making it feel like it's a justified part of the story, even outside of this plot development. You know, I think it allows for a little bit of coincidence like that to happen. Like, it's fine for it to happen in circumstances like this. So I think it was done pretty well. And, you know, there's an argument that, you know, convenient that Zenith ends up there. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that either. I think it's just a case of that was kind of the catalyst for things rather than the other way around. I think, like, coincidences to get people into trouble are generally fine. It's when coincidences get you out of trouble that's where writing tends to come to issues. It's not always the case that that's a bad thing, but yeah, generally, yeah, as a general writing rule, you generally can utilize bad luck to you can give your protagonists bad luck to get them into trouble, start situations up. You got to be careful when you're using good luck. Yeah, and I will say that's also a little bit more it's a little more well explained in the books itself. The fact that, again, there's not really much about teleportation, and I remember in the books it was referenced as the teleportation labyrinth book was mentioned as not even like something it was because he had so few options as far as things about teleportation that this first-hand account of the teleportation labyrinth just so happened to be one of the better resources for talking about teleportation itself, because, you know, study of teleportation is basically illegal everywhere. So you kind of have to get this kind of second-hand knowledge like that. So that's what he takes with him, and then it's at some point during this whole experience that's when he realizes, oh shit, this book is talking about this labyrinth. What the fuck? And that's kind of how things went on. So again, it does kind of feel a little clunky here in the anime, the way they did it, but also it's such a minor thing. It's not something I'm gonna really hold against it.
アイシャはきちんとやっていますでしょうか。はい、頑張ってますよ。 ルーデウス様のお手を煩わせるようなことはございませんか？
何も。家事も全部してくれてますし、助かっています。
そうですか。わがままを言ってなければいいんですが。
もう少しぐらいわがままを言ってくれた方が俺としては楽だったかもしれませんね。
Yeah, and that's another that's another great moment. Like I do love the dynamic between Lilia and Rudy. Like there's a lot of like there's a lot of things going on with Lilia about how she's never really fully heals from all her old traumas, but like she heals partly, but like her entire worldview is completely different from just how a regular person would function because again, so much of her feels herself as the lesser, and she doesn't realize that, Aisha is Rudy's sister and Rudy loves her like a sister, or that he doesn't feel like she owes him anything, and things like that. And in some ways, she does become almost like a maternal figure to Rudy. Not quite the same, but like she does kind of have that role in his life, and she doesn't even realize that he views her that way.
何ですか父さん、さっきからニヤニヤと。
いや、なんかいいなって思ってな。
何がですか？
ルディがよ、きちんと大人になってリーリャと話してるって光景がさ。そういやルディ、子供が生まれるとか言ってたな。
実は魔法大学に在学中に結婚したんです。
結婚？誰と？エリスとか？
いえ、シルフィーと魔法大学で再会できまして。
シルフィー？ブエナ村のか。
Oh, that face on Lilia is great.
彼女は彼女で大変そうでしたけどね。
Yeah, and I also like this moment because Rudy is like almost kind of embarrassed about this because he realizes he's been kind of having this happy home life. He's been building a family. He's been kind of the happiest he's ever been while Paul's been on this really difficult journey that's kind of broken him down trying to find Zenith. And on top of that, he had to send his daughters away, even though he knew that they were going to be safe. He's still, San's family now. But so Rudy like feels guilty for having had such a nice time. And, so he almost feels ashamed talking to Paul like this. But then you're going to realize that Paul's actually just really happy for him because, it's his son. He wants his son to be happy. So he's just... it's a cool, really complex dynamic. And then Lilia is just kind of there, just being happy, which is cute. I still say that Lilia was one of the biggest fumbles of the anime adaptation, where they don't show how she was beforehand, how she was this hyper-stoic, hyper-logical character who kind of suppressed her emotions, and the fact that when she shows emotions, that's such a big fucking deal. But yeah.
そうか。結婚、子供。孫か。すまなかったな。俺が不甲斐ないせいで父親になろうってやつをこんなところまで呼び出して。
いえ、申し訳なく思っています。母さんが見つかってもいないのに自分だけ。
帰ったらみんなで盛大なお祝いしなきゃ。
Yeah, that's a great and that is one thing I do actually like about the anime adaptation, that they did show at least a little bit of Sylphie kind of interacting with the Grey Rats even after Rudy left, how they would have developed a bit of a bond. So, and Lily is like, oh yay, Sylphie's okay and having good. Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, no, I'm pretty sure the anime did actually mention that Paul raped Lilia. They didn't that is something they actually did explain in the anime, I'm pretty sure. But what I was thinking about, I'm thinking about the Lilia's chapter in Volume 1, where that was before they revealed that Paul was the one that Paul had raped her. That was well before that reveal. But just showing kind of Lilia's mindset, having her, it wasn't her narrating, but it was from her perspective, just going through her thought process, how she gets fucked over, but then she just sees the logical side of things and is just grateful they didn't fuck her over even more. That kind of way of thinking. Just showing that she just doesn't have emotions at that point. Really. So that when Rudy is able to kind of break her in that way, and the moments where she actually just show her emotions, just you see the contrast from where she was to where she is now. Like, I think that one moment when in season 1 where they where Rudy reunites with Aisha and Lilia for a while, when Lilia just goes up and hugs him and like just, you know, acts all motherly towards him. Like, that's such a huge moment that the anime onlys are not going to pick up on. Because they don't know just how much she suppressed her emotions before.
パウロおじいちゃんですよ。
よせよ、まだそんな年じゃねえんだから。子供ができたってことはルディ、お前も男になったってことだよな。
旦那様、あまり下品なことをお聞きになるのはどうかと思いますが。
いいじゃねえかよ。俺はな、ルディとこういう話を一度ぐらいはしてみたいと思ってたんだよ。父さん、そっちのことに関してはちょっとばかし自信があるんだ。
And that's a nice throwback to how Paul was early in the series, where his whole thing was he was kind of eagerly throwing himself into being the cool dad, and a lot of times it would just he would fall flat on his face because he didn't really know what he was doing, but you could tell he was very eager and very trying. Yeah, and that is true. I mean, old Paul was a very complicated character, and I think the fact that we don't see a whole lot of him kind of lends a lot of intrigue to that, because, I mean, it's one of the things where he was in a very bad emotional situation. He also did something completely unacceptable, and he also just was generally an asshole for a long time. And it really was not until, he gets Zenith pregnant, and then he realizes, oh shit, my circumstances have changed. It's different now. Like, I got a kid on the way. My father sucked. I need to not be like that. So that was kind of what really changed him fundamentally. Yeah, so.
でも聞けよ。
そうですね。じゃあいくつか聞きたいことがあるんですが。
まったくルーデウス様まで。
リーリャもこうは言っちゃいるが、あっちの方となると激しくってな。
旦那様。
そういや、いつかの時だってリーリャの方から誘ってきたんだったな。
その時の話詳しくお願いします。
ルーデウス様までやめてください。
Yeah, and that's also funny. And the moments like that, again, the fact that they're able to tease Lilia like that, which is like, that's also a pretty big deal, shows that she's done a lot of healing. The fact that she has enough emotional capacity to be embarrassed like that. Lilia's such a great character that the anime kind of fucked up.
ルディ、打ち合わせ通りに行くぞ。いいな。
了解。
皆様、ご分を。
よし、行こう。
I like that sound effect.
パウロよ、お前の息子は便利なものを持ってきよるの。
まあな、自慢の息子だからな。
Yeah, and again, I also still like how a lot of the stuff that Rudy brings to the table in many scenarios, aside from the fact that he is a very powerful mage on his own, I love how so much of what he adds to things are the things that other people helped him with, other things that other people gave him. Like, with that was a gift from, I believe it was Nanahoshi, showing him a spell to summon light familiars. Okay. Later, he gets his magic armor. That came from a combination of Nanahoshi, Cliff, and Zenoba from doing all their research and construction, where Rudy mostly just built the structure of the armor, and they kind of did all the other design elements of it. So, and this is just a consistent pattern. So much of what he, again, like, that's the stuff that Sylphie taught him, is that he gets to rely on the people at his sides. So I like how they just kind of consistently hammer that in. Yeah, not like the friendship battery that you see in a lot of old school shonen, but like actually like becoming stronger because of the people who you have at your side.
魔法陣を踏むとどこかに飛ばされてしまうので避けて歩く。しかしたまに光らない魔法陣もあるので注意が必要でしたね。
そうだ。ギースの足跡をしっかりと踏んでいけよ。
And again, and that also, the fact that they're literally following Geese's footsteps. Oh, with context, that says so much. God fucking damn it, I wish I could talk about it. And I will say it's also really cool to actually finally like see Paul in action for real. Like when he's, maybe he's not at 100%, but he's like close to it. Where, obviously he's not even the best swordsman we've seen so far. I would say at this point, Eris is probably a better, at least better at sword god style than he is. Because even though she's not officially saint yet, or actually at this point in the story, she is officially saint, but the last time Rudy had interacted with her, she wasn't officially saint tier yet, but I would say she probably had the skill of a saint tier swordsman. And Paul kind of capped out at advanced in all three styles, which again also kind of gives him a perspective and an experience that a higher level sword god style user might not have. But also he has this incredible amount of practical experience from adventuring because he became an S rank adventurer. He has a lot of combat experience, so he's kind of a badass when he actually locks in. So it's cool to finally see him really in action, because the last time we really saw that was when he was, still kind of fucked up and drunk. And Rudy kicked his ass at that point. Yeah, that's also true. I mean, realistically, also, prime capability Paul, there's an argument that it was also before he settled down with Zenith, was maybe when he was at his best, because that was when he was actively fighting things, continually doing things. And while he did still fight as when he settled down in Buena, because he went on those monster eradication journeys, it was not like a challenge for him. So he might have actually gotten a little bit rusty during that time. I wouldn't be surprised, despite his training. Like, because, training can only do so much when you learn so much through practical experience that he just wasn't getting at that point. But also, we don't get to a point ever where we see Paul, like, because Paul never really takes any of the training super seriously and really tries to develop himself, so we never actually really know what he could have been. Yeah, that's also true. I mean, we don't know how Paul would have been post, like the real, like there's probably, I would say, yeah, you bring up a good point. One thing I'm thinking is, I imagine he was probably very capable shortly after the teleportation incident, where he is, he has his more mature mindset, and he also is in a position where he actually has to kind of challenge himself. So he probably got pretty good at that point. If it wasn't for the fact that he got completely emotionally broken down by all that, then I don't know, he probably could have been like really something there.
パウロ、さっきから前に出過ぎですわよ。私が前でしょ。
第一階層ならそう変わりゃしねえだろうが。
私はともかく、ルーデウスは迷宮自体が初なんですから、大人として見本を見せなさいな。
だからその緊張をほぐしてやろうと会話の機会を伺ってだな。
嘘をおっしゃい。今のあなたからはゼニスがパーティーに入った頃の浮ついた空気。
And I do love their bickering. Like I said before, they may have been, things have been forgiven, but also, she still doesn't particularly like the guy, so they're bickering and fighting. It's adorable, honestly.
いや、まあそれを言われると弱いけどよ。なんだお前、随分と口やかましくなったんだな。
当たり前ですわ。パウロは息子も同然なんですから、叱りもしますわ。
何が息子だよ。なあ、ルディ。
That's funny. And yeah, it's also funny when you yeah, again, it's also funny, yeah, considering that he doesn't know that she's Sylphie's grandmother, and it's it's just a funny scene, but it also just shows that Elinalise, despite everything, Paul is her family now, so she actually does like have a degree of care for him. So it's adorable. Elinalise is such a great character, honestly.
あそこが第二階層への魔法陣だ。
敵が邪魔ですね。
Okay, and I think you guys might be curious of knowing, but my cat, I think the catnip has taken hold because she is lying on the floor staring intently at the door. So I have a feeling that, she's having a good time right now.
行くぞ。よいか、火は使うな。
なぜですか？
火を使うと部屋の中に毒が充満しよる。特に階層が深くなると注意が必要じ
And
ゃ。
actually, that's also an interesting way of looking at things. The air fills with poison, which, you know, if you think of using fire in an enclosed space, it burns up all the oxygen because that's what it uses as fuel. And I'm assuming that fire, even magical fire in this world, does use oxygen to fuel it. But, you know, so it's not like it necessarily fills the air with poison, but it just takes away the stuff you need to breathe. So that's kind of neat.
毒とはおそらく一酸化炭素中毒
Or carbon monoxide, yeah.
それから天井を攻撃するのもご法度じゃ。
Yeah,
理由はわかるな。
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard that, you know, some cats don't really get that effect. Some cats don't really like it, but it definitely mellows mine out because, again, she is completely in her own world right now, which, I mean, you kind of heard her earlier, how she was kind of interrupting and being difficult, and she was running around a lot. Like, the fact that she's chill right now is actually kind of a very real showcase of how that stuff does work on her.
洞窟が崩壊するかもしれないからですね。
そうじゃ。じゃからあま
And
り
again, I do love this little theme right here that they do in a lot of combat scenarios. That little string melody there. I like how that's just a recurring thing. It's cool. It's
ない方
awesome.
がいい。なるべく氷を使え。
了解。
さすがロキシーの弟子じゃな。使う魔術まで同じとはの。
Okay. Actually, excuse me real quick. I need to use the restroom. I will be right back. Okay, I am back. My cat was meowing at me. She saw I got up and decided she had something to say about it. Now she's no longer staring at the door, but now she is staring at a wall. Okay, let me just quickly double check, make sure everything is working the way I think it should. And yeah, it does look like it is working. YouTube Studio is being annoying. It thinks that the audio bitrate isn't there, but that just does that every time I switch from my BRB screen. So yeah, it is what it is. All right, let's keep watching.
こっちで問題なさそうだ。
よし、みんな魔法陣に乗るんだ。
Yeah, one thing I'm curious as to one thing it's a little I need to be able to speak words. One thing I do like about the books, which I could see them not including it here, but I think it would be really neat, is they mention that a lot of the monsters going deeper in, because they get more intelligent, they start actually utilizing the teleportation and set up like ambushes outside of the destination points to teleportation circles. And I think that was a really cool world building element. So I'm kind of hoping they actually include it here, where they teleport somewhere and then there are monsters right there waiting to try to get them. I don't know. Again, it's such a minor thing. I wouldn't be upset if they didn't show it, but I thought it was really cool in the books.
よし、ここで一旦休憩だ。 どうしたルディ？お前も早く済ませろ。
はい。
それにしてもパウロが静かだ。第一階層の時はこうした休憩ごとにどうだとかなんとか聞いてきたのだが、さすがに第二階層ともなると真剣さが違うな。
Yeah.
ダディがクールだ。
Yeah, and I know they're kind of explicitly saying this right here, but also like it is neat to see that now that shit's starting to get real. Paul's like locking in.
先輩、もうすぐ第3階層だ。本の通りなら転移罠は同じ階層にしか飛ばされないらしい。運が良ければロキシーはまだその辺りにいるかもな。
はい。もっと何日もかけて潜るかと思っていました。
基本はそうだが、今回はお前が持ってきた本があるからな。
手探りで進むのと地図を使って進むのでは違って当然か。ここからが本番だ。まずはロキシーを見つけるのだ。
I will say another thing. I do kind of wish there were more examinations of labyrinths in Mushoku Tensei, because I think they're a really cool part of the world. Like, I love that Rifujin basically found a way to make like JRPG dungeons make sense in this context, and not just the fact that, you know, they have the dungeons themselves that get dangerous the deeper you go when you eventually fight a boss to get the ultimate reward, but also the fact that they way that magic kind of seeps into the gear of adventurers adds an RNG loot system as well. I think that's just a cool concept, but we never really have like an extensive look at a dungeon at a labyrinth outside of the teleportation labyrinth, and I think that's a bit of a shame. It also, again, it's kind of goes back to one thing. I think the main series, the biggest issue I think it has is that Rifujin was just too ambitious, added too many things all at once, and couldn't really wrap all of them up together.
先輩よ、勘でいいんだが、ロキシーはどの辺にいると思う？
勘って。
どうした？
Yeah, and these little zooms I love. They're always very, I don't know, they're very stylish.
突然どうしたんですの？
Yeah, and then the music starting up like that. It's just that's such a great moment. And I also do really like this moment here, just because we get to see that, like up to this point, we kind of just heard that Roxy's become a badass. Now we actually get to see that she's become a badass. She's cool under pressure, even though she's, you know, been, kind of surviving around here for a month. You know, she based on what the books said, she was really going through it. You know, so it's cool. And also, as cool as Rudy's silent casting is, I just love the overall just audiovisual effect of seeing a mage in combat using incantations, how they're just kind of, it goes alongside the music and all the action happening. It's just, it's cool in a way that Rudy just can't be. Oh, and by the way, the cat's back, but she's just kind of sitting around now. She's not causing any problems. So, I don't know if she'll end up making any noise, but if she does, that's what you'll hear. I also do love the little addition of how the teleportation labyrinth just kind of brings new monsters there. Yeah, and now she's using fire, which actually a nice setup because of how Tallhand was saying, hey, you're in here, don't use fire if you can help it. So that just shows a good way of showing that she's starting to get desperate.
荘厳なる大地の鎧をまとわんハースフォートレス
And then that music is just so, like, so intense. And then you see, like, when Roxy, like, she's done a lot of growing up. We know her whole story arc was about kind of shedding her childishness and coming into herself, finding the confidence and getting maturity that way. And people, you know, start viewing her as an adult when she stops trying to make herself be viewed as an adult, that whole thing. And now that she's kind of in her most desperate moment, she kind of reverts back to that childishness where she's just crying out aimlessly for help. And, like, you know, it's really nice character work. It's good, a good moment. And then it also is a great setup for when things go full circle, to where now Rudy is someone who can come to her and actually, you know, be somebody important who saves her, not in the same way that she saved him, but, like, you know, again, they kind of rectify that imbalance there where now they've both kind of helped each other. And that's a freaky visual. I like that. And I love that the you know, the underlighting glow of the magic is reflecting off of her hat. That's a pretty neat effect. Yeah, I agree. The overall just color composition, the way they're using these kind of, I mean, they're really only using 3 colors in this scene. Like, it's cool. And then I remember that, you know, this was a touching scene. I remember in the books it gets really funny, and I hope it does that here as well. Or, oh, that's okay. That's the end of the. Okay, so at the beginning of the next episode, it's probably when it happens. But I remember in the books this scene gets very funny very quickly because she doesn't recognize him and he just loses his shit. He has an existential crisis. It's great. So yeah, I don't even want to go into a preamble now. I just want to get to the next episode because I'm excited. And this is, yeah, that's just the as much as this is a great scene on its own, you know, this monologue is not a monologue. The soliloquy is great. Like I think her voice acting is very good. It's really showing. It's also just like, you got to think of the context where this is probably the first time since she left, that she felt like genuinely as hopeless as she does. Like, I mean, she does believe genuinely that she's not getting out of this. Like, not that she's going to give up, but like, stewing on all her regrets, not entirely dissimilar to how Rudy was in the prologue of Volume 1, where he was in a bad situation. He assumed it was the end of his, you know, not necessarily the end of his life, but the end of his comfort, where, like, it's just like, what are all these things I've never managed to do, all these things I still want, and now I'm never going to see it. And it's funny because, yeah. And, you know, and it's funny because Rudy's getting a little creepy, but also it's like, she was the person who, like, kind of gave him the first big push he needed in this world, where she kind of helped him get over that first big emotional hurdle of his. And, like, that's, as much as it's kind of a meme how much he simps for her after this point, but after that point, it's also like, it just shows that, like, she's somebody he really respects, is grateful to, he looks up to. And the fact that she has the low self-esteem issues herself also kind of adds to that dynamic, gives a lot of interesting things you can do with it. But it's just the fact that he idolizes her and he's just overwhelmed by this, and she probably wouldn't view herself as being deserving of all that. You know, again, just all of this stuff contributes to the nonverbal things they're doing in this scene, and I really like it. And it's funny that he just, like, his emotional reaction to not being recognized kind of overrides his logic, because again, he was 7 years old when she last saw him, or so, like, you know, he's he looks different, even though to us as viewers he looks not that different, but like he's it's not surprising that she wouldn't recognize him. It's kind of funny though.
どこかでお会いしましたか
Yeah.
その
I mean, granted, it also in the books, it really does sell the fact that she's kind of exhausted at the end of her rope, a little bit delirious, so she wouldn't be thinking completely clearly. So it would make less sense if they did the same kind of thing here, because she doesn't look as at her wit's end as she did in the books. Let me see. Let me see. Excuse me. Oh yeah, it is. Why the fuck is it? Okay, I don't. Thanks for pointing that out. I don't know why that is. It shouldn't be. Yeah, that's weird. Let me try adjusting that. Let me see if it's still frozen on the other. Okay, that's interesting. It's frozen on YouTube, but not on Kick. That's weird. Let me see if I can just adjust that. Maybe I can fix that. Let's see. Okay, let's try that now. Okay, there we go. That fixed it. That was very weird. I don't know why it did that. Thank you for pointing that out. I would not have known if that was the case. So, yeah, seems to be an OBS bug, but it's weird. It only bugged on one of the OBS instances. Okay, that was strange. Okay, but I'm glad I got that fixed. Those things, I don't know if it was necessarily like a direct link, but I think a big thing is that I still think that the whole thing with Rudy and Roxy is that, again, Roxy was the person who brought him outside the home. That was the first major hurdle that he overcame, and he overcame it with her help, and she kind of set him on his path forward. And I think in some way he very much attributes all of his successes since then to her. So, I mean, it's not like in some ways when he sees her again, he becomes that little kid again, but he's like desperate for her valuation, desperate for approval, desperate to be of use to her. So he's just really throws himself into that role. And he's just so excited that he can't control himself. Yeah, and again, I love how she has these like really just self-conscious moments of, asking for these little tiny favors. It's just like very cautious about things. And I think it does lead into some great stuff later on in the story, especially once she becomes part of the family and she slowly has this same type of reservation with them, where for a long time she doesn't feel like she's an equally valued part of the family, where she knows Rudy loves her, but she doesn't feel like part of the group. And it's not really until the whole hat thing, that scene, which they better not fucking skip that scene. I'll be pissed if they do. But when she realizes the family all got together to get her a new hat, that's when she finally realizes, oh, I am a member of this family. They do value me. So it's nice. Again, it's just a continuation of the stuff we're seeing here. She just doesn't. It's funny because she just doesn't realize just how much Rudy likes her. Like how much he cares. Like I think in part of the way she's missing him. She wants to kind of catch up with him. Again, have that one-on-one time to see if they can kind of reforge that bond they had. But like, and Rudy is all into it. Where it's funny, and yeah, that's also true, Alan. He doesn't quite pick up on the implications here, but also we can't forget that Roxy had been told that she was going to be rescued and have somebody and fall in love with the person. So, she is kind of assuming that the upcoming events are kind of predetermined. So she's acting in a slightly different way than she might have otherwise. Okay. And that was, sorry, I got to go back and watch that. I will say, I actually do kind of like how when you look at things, because they do. Mushoku Tensei is not like a video gamey world, but it takes some video gamey elements to it, and a lot of it feels more video gamey because in the books it's filtered through Rudy's perception, and he views it through, oh, I've played games like this before. But I do like how if you look at this party, they actually almost kind of have their own actual JRPG party composition going on with Paul being kind of the versatile warrior, Tall Hand is the tank, Lynn Elise is kind of like a DPS, and Rudy and Roxy are both two different types of mages. Rudy tends to act like in a more of a support role based on his experience with Quagmire. Roxy's kind of a DPS. It's cool. That mindset is again a product of a lot of the experiences Rudy has been through, where he kind of jumped the gun and that blew up in his face a lot. So yeah, again, it's really one thing I do am impressed by is the fact that this show, this series in general, takes place over a long period of time. It's 20 something years before this story concludes, and it's really a lot of believable changes in people's personality, thoughts, and behavior over such a long period of time. I do really like that, and that is one thing that does kind of annoy me about a lot of stories is. One thing is Mushoku Tensei is more willing to do like time skips than other series tend to be, which is, one of the reasons you can get to a 20-year story, or even if you just look at from volume 3 onward, which that's still, 12 to 13 years for the rest of the series. If you look at something like Lord of the Rings, that entire trilogy happened over like a year and a half or so. Like everything feels really compressed in other stories. I like that this one actually gives the characters space to breathe, and in some cases, if it was Eris there instead of Roxy, she would have just really just wailed on him, just completely knocked the shit out of him. Okay, so I guess they're not gonna do the scene yet. Okay, so next week we got an exciting series of stuff happening next week. So. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see how this the next section is going to go. But that's going to be what we watch for today. That being said, I do think we still have plenty of time for a video essay. So let me see if I can pull something up. Let me just because I got it. I have a playlist on my personal account, my viewing account. I don't do my creating stuff and my viewing on the same channel, so let me see where view full playlist. Okay, so there's a couple different videos. Let me actually pull it up. So it's being a little slow right now. So most of what I got is Mushoku Tensei related, but it's not all Mushoku Tensei related. Actually, here, let me change this a little bit just because... Oops, excuse me. Sorry, this is being a little... Uh-oh. I see what I did. I clicked the wrong thing. Yeah, let me get this. Come on, there we go. Yeah, I just want to not show too much of my zone. So okay, so let's go through what kind of options we got here. So most of it is Mushoku Tensei related, and a lot of this is just stuff that I kind of ran into and saved just because it looked like it could be an interesting thing for the stream. So there's a mix of good and bad here. This looks like it's going to be a pretty bad video. We watched this. There's one different thing that I didn't see. This one is one that I think might be rage bait, which could be fun. And this is the one that's also not... Sayano Uta is one that I may want to watch at some point, but that's an hour long, so that's tough. This was one that I saw that is not Mushoku Tensei related, but I think, it could provide some interesting discussions. I don't know. Does anyone have any particular preferences? Okay, Scamboli reviews. Okay, I might... I'll look into that on after the stream. But yeah, so... Yeah... I'm curious. I don't really know. I haven't watched, aside from the videos that we've already watched on stream. I'm actually familiar with any of these. Although again, this one I saw the first few seconds. So let's get a few. Let's do we want to do power scaling, rage bait, or lollies? I think we can pick one of those three. Does anyone have any preferences? No, that's not the rage bait. It's This one is the rage bait. Yeah, this is the power scaling. Rage bait. Lollies. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't have a strong preference at the moment either. That's why I'm trying to see if there is a preference on your guys' side. Okay, let me just do... Yeah, okay, yeah, so far, so what I'm getting is that there's not a whole lot of people really care one way or another while watching. So, you know what? Let's do... I'm actually curious to see what this guy says. Oh, rage bait? Actually, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's do rage bait then. Yeah, I don't have a strong preference, but yeah, let's do rage bait. So
temporaries, which is...
So again, I think this is likely bait, and the comments are kind of dumb as well. And so, yeah, that's true as well. I know, but okay. So there we go. Let me get the thing. One thing we just got to make sure we know is that while this may be rage bait, I'm not saying it definitely is, but I get the impression that it might be rage bait. That regardless of any of that, we're not being dicks. That's not how we're going to be. Like, again, regardless of what we think about the video itself, the work that went into this video is the reason you're able to watch this stream content right now. So let's, yeah, don't go being an asshole to him. If anybody, especially anybody who's watching the VOD later on, if there's something you absolutely have to say, I would prefer that you say it in the comments of the VOD so that I get the algorithm boost and we don't have to go starting shit. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Keep any vitriol in my comments because that, I think, is the best of both worlds. I'm not saying don't be a little bit, don't crash. I'm not saying don't crash out. I'm just saying don't do it on this guy. And again, for the sake of crediting the original creator, again, this is not to be a dick. This is to be able to go see it yourself and actually give the video some watch time, support it. Like, again, be nice. This is the video, so yeah. All right, so let's see what we got going on here. And again, I only watched the first few seconds of this video. Might be rage bait. Let's see.
Mushoku Tensei actively glorifies pedophilia. Ooh, we're going in hot.
I already just... Yeah, that was the intro to that video. Again, that's why I think it's completely wrong. I mean, I obviously think that it's not portraying Rudy's behavior as a good thing. So, yeah. Yeah, Thomas, that was essentially my reaction when I first clicked on the video and heard that. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is a video for the stream.
Mushoku Tensei is an anime based on a light novel by Refugin Namagano, which is...
I'm not going to comment on the pronunciation. It's a foreign language, but yeah, that was bad. But I do find it funny that he pronounced the name in the like it's French and not Japanese.
Been referred to as one of the progenitors of the modern isekai genre. It follows an unnamed 34-year-old otaku who is kicked out of his house by estranged family members and dies thinking he's wasted his life. But he's reincarnated with all of his memories as Rudius Greyrat, a baby in a fantasy world.
Pretty much,
standard isekai stuff so far, right? Is representative of general audience, goes to fantasy world, is an overpowered general creep in said fantasy world.
Yeah.
That said,
I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily representative of the general audience, because I think Mushoku Tensei does tend to take the starting point of isekai, which, yeah, the hikikomori isekai protagonist is nothing unique, but like Rudy's situation is worse than most. Yeah, that is what I'm suspecting, Amir. But again, I'm going to give him a fair chance. Who knows? Maybe his arguments will be really good and will convince me. I doubt it. And I mean, when it comes to, honestly, Alan, I will think it's kind of fair to initially judge him as overpowered because he does have some significant advantages. And also, he just kind of lucks into being able to learn magic in a different way than is taught, so that he has to, yeah, he has crazy levels of power, but also a crazy understanding of how to use that power. So, yeah, his weaknesses are not in his ability, essentially.
His creepiness factor is a bit higher than his contemporaries, which is a pretty fucking high bar. For example, one of the first things this show depicts Rudius doing is getting excited that he gets to touch his mother's breasts while breastfeeding.
Yep.
Which, yeah, but it's anime. Sexual harassment in anime is a lot like body odor at a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. It's everywhere and no one even knows how to start dealing with it.
I mean, there's some truth to that. I mean, yeah, I mean, sexual harassment and stuff like that is played off as a joke in a lot of anime, but also, like, Rudy as a character is also just having just gotten out of 20 years of degeneracy and isolation to the point where he doesn't really view people as people. Is it surprising that he'd be kind of a creep at that point?
So you just try to cope. As Rudius gets older, he starts to make friends with people that are visually his age. And since this is an isekai, all these friends are girls. The problem is, these girls' ages range from 5 to 15, while his actual age ranges from 39 to 47. The age difference doesn't temper his sexual harassment either. Rudius actively lusts after a 5-year-old.
Okay, and again, I mean, I know. Let me pause it at the right point. Yeah, so he points out this line. I see people bring this line up a lot, but never bring up the fact that he literally in the next line walks it back. Like he said, like in the light novels. I don't know if he read the light novels. I'm guessing he didn't, since he's talking about the anime and he references the light novels as existing, but. So I'm going to assume he has not read them, but in the light novels, he literally follows it up with, oh, nope, bad thoughts, bad thoughts. And I mean, I will somewhat agree with you, Thomas, that the biology is a factor, although we never really know exactly how much of a factor it is. Like, Rudy suspects that he might be learning faster due to his new biology, but we don't know that for sure. And we don't really know exactly how much of his psychology is his old psychology, how much of it is his new psychology. It's a little bit unclear. And also, in another sense, his rebirth is very much a rebirth emotionally as well, because it puts him in a new circumstance. He's able to kind of grow on his own as opposed to kind of being in that little slump he was in his old life. So, I mean, it's one of those things where also, even on top of that, it's not showcasing his attitudes here as good. Like, it's pretty clearly showing the things he feels and does as bad. Like, he's developing these connections, doesn't know how to interpret them non-sexually, and he acts inappropriately, and it's not portrayed as a good thing. It's just portrayed.
Actively lusts after a 5-year-old. He tries to sleep with a 12-year-old, and he does sleep with a 15-year-old. And did this blatant display of pedophilia get rejected by the general anime community? Huh. No. See, Mushoku Tensei is beautifully animated, which you can probably tell by the B-roll that I'm using. And
but also, it's interesting because they, I think he is falling into the trap of it's depicted, therefore it is endorsed, which is, a weird thing. Like, it feels like people who do that just can't separate fantasy and reality. Like, they can't understand that things existing in a fictional world is not necessarily a showcase that the author thinks they should exist in the real world. I don't know.
It's well written if you ignore the sexualization of children. Rudius enters as a very accurate depiction of an otaku. Horny, socially inept, socially rejected, internally troubled.
Yeah, I mean, he fits like the extreme stereotype of an otaku, sure. But like, I mean, I've known a lot of otakus in my life. Most of them are not like Rudy.
A very good job of building a character arc around Rudius coming to terms with and correcting a lot of his personal flaws. Legitimate talent went into this show.
I also think it's a little bit weird that he's kind of glossing over the rejection side of things, since his isolation is literally the source of all of his trauma, where it's like really hard. Yeah, and that's one of the things. I'm actually surprised Game of Thrones didn't filter people more than it did, because they show some like really horrific things, like way worse than anything in Mushoku Tensei in Game of Thrones, and it was kind of just broadly accepted. I don't know. It might just be. I mean, I know it's a little bit of a thing people tend to lean on, but I do think in popular culture there is a bit of a bias against anime, where they kind of view things in anime as worse than in an equivalent live action scenario, which I don't know.
Is indisputable. And when compared to other isekai, any talent is noteworthy. This much seems to have been blinding, because even relatively based anime reviewers like Mother's Basement are out here bowing before Mushoku Tensei's ability.
Okay, I will say that's actually kind of interesting, him saying that, relatively based reviewers, which that is not how I would describe Mother's Basement. But also we have completely opposite reactions to his Mushoku Tensei review, which is very funny.
To make cool explosion. I'm being a bit reductive. The
More than a
YouTube
bit.
anime community does recognize that Rudius is lecherous and gross. That he thinks of women as sexual objects, at least partially, through much of
at the
show.
start. At the
But they
start,
cite
yeah.
that those thoughts are curbed. Here's Mother's Basement doing just that.
And working hard at it, seeing the women in his life do the same, is the main catalyst that spurs Rudy's growth as a character and his growing respect for them, not as characters, but people.
Yes, Rudius's
Okay.
character arc does have him slowly addressing and fixing many of his flaws, and a gross view of sex is one of them.
Okay, so it's interesting. So if he understands this at this point, he understands that a lot of the point of the story is that he grows past these unhealthy behaviors, unhealthy attitudes. Like, if he understands that's the point, I'm still not sure how he's upset that it exists in the first place. Like, how can you have a story that's about overcoming your own internal toxicity without having that toxicity in the first place? Because, I mean, I feel like that's a lot of what people miss about the show. They think they don't realize that it's a story about Rudy healing and growing, at least at first. Where, up to the first 2 seasons of the show, where we are at the point, is basically Rudy breaking out of his old mindset and becoming an adult. So, like, most people completely miss that, and that's why they completely reject the uncomfortable elements of Mushoku Tensei, because they don't realize that that's the point. He seems to realize that that's the point, and is still angry about it. So I'm actually very curious as to what he has to say about this.
Problem is that many of the characters his gross view of sex is directed at are not women. They are children. And
Doesn't that serve to make it gross? Like, isn't that the point? I genuinely don't understand. Like, he says, okay, he's supposed to come out of this morally incorrect space where he's supposed to be, he's morally in the wrong, and he needs to kind of grow and develop so he becomes morally in the right. But this is too morally in the wrong. Like, why is there even a line? What is the line? Why?
Rudius is not. Rudius is a full adult. He's mentally unaffected by being reborn as a child. He maintains all of his memories, personality traits, and experience from his previous 34 years of life.
Yeah. It's weird. It's like, it just would have been, I mean, if he was still this lecherous, creepy person, like, it still would have been wrong, but it's just a different type of wrong. But I don't understand why that one type of wrong is okay and the other type of wrong is not, especially when the story is about somebody being wrong and growing up because of it. Again, I genuinely do not understand his logic here, because even for most parts, most of the people who have, I think, dumb takes about taboo or edgy media, a lot of times, even if I completely disagree with everything they say, I can at least understand what their thought process is. This guy's a total fucking enigma to me.
Rudius navigates social situations.
And I will say, it's definitely possible he's affected by his biology. I just think we don't have enough hard information to be able to say what extent his new biology has on his psychology.
And manipulates people.
I gotta.
4 years of life. Rudius navigates social situations and manipulates people on multiple occasions in ways that a child could never do.
Yeah, that's also like indicative of how another issue Rudy had early on, where early on he couldn't even really view people as people at the point. He was kind of the protagonist and everyone else was an NPC. And he just didn't understand how anybody worked. He doesn't understand how emotions work, how human connection works, how even other people's thoughts worked, how other people's perspectives worked. So the way he interacted with the world early on is that he would essentially logic his way through things. He didn't understand how people thought and felt. So instead of kind of engaging as a person, he kind of just envisioned a dialogue tree in front of him, and he would try to contort himself so he acted in a specific way to get a specific response. And it always blew up in his face. Like, he was seen as a weird kid. He didn't always get the reaction he was looking for. But, I mean, the whole point is that he is so emotionally stunted that the only way he can interface with people is through a purely logical lens. So yeah, the fact that he's manipulative is partly because, he views as this input gets that output, but he's also, again, just doesn't really see people as people at that point, and it takes him a while to break out of that. And even in, especially, it's more clear in the light novels, but a lot of little emotional revelations he doesn't even realize he has them in the moment. Hey, welcome, Ancap, glad you could make it. But yeah, so he doesn't have these, he has these little epiphanies. Like, I think the biggest one is after the emergency family meeting, how he views Paul and infidelity and all that stuff, where before he starts before the emergency family meeting happens, Rudy actually expresses neutral to positive thoughts about Paul cheating on Zenith with Lilia. He's like, oh yeah, a guy like Paul would have a harem. He would be sleeping around. Then he sees how much Zenith is hurt by all that, and that's something he already doesn't like. He doesn't like how Rudy, how he doesn't like hurting the people he cares about. He had just hurt Sylphie in a similar way, and he learned from that. He saw just how much Zenith was hurt, and he did a complete 180 on the whole infidelity thing. He immediately rejected the idea of cheating. He hated what Paul did to him, even though like 3 days prior he was okay with it. Again, that's just kind of how Rudy is. He's so emotionally broken that he needs to have his moment of being low before he can really be built up. Yeah, and I also agree, Sunders. Definitely.
When Rudius is 8, it's revealed that his father has gotten both his mother and their maid pregnant. This obviously drives a wedge between the three of them. However, worried about the ramifications, Rudius lies to shift the narrative from his father was cheating on his mother with the maid to, his father was only raping the maid. Which, yeah...
I don't get how you could misrepresent that scene so badly. Like, did you even watch that, or did you read a synopsis of it? Because it's not like saying he was downplaying the cheating by saying, it was sexual assault. What he was doing is he was trying to shift the blame off of Lilia and onto Paul, so that any actions that Zenith takes wouldn't be like retaliating against Lilia. He was trying to frame it as, Lilia is the victim here, so don't send her away. It's not her fault. And also there was also kind of a more nuance as well, because it was a whole thing about Rudy's transactional mindset, which I don't know if he realizes that Rudy views things in a transactional way at this point. I don't really trust this guy to think. But yeah, Rudy, his whole thing was Lilia will die if she gets sent away, most likely. The most likely scenario is that she gives birth, and then a month later she goes out, still weak from giving birth. Most likely the two of them will die. Next most likely scenario is the two of them get caught and sold into slavery. So, like, he wasn't trying to downplay the infidelity. He was trying to, again, offload the blame from Lilia onto Paul by saying, and the only way he could really think to do that was that, Paul kind of forced it on her. And also, it doesn't help that, like, Zenith immediately realizes that Rudy's bullshitting, and then that kind of gives her, like, a spark of, like, yeah, I can't just send her away to die. That would not fit with my morals. So, yeah, that's just such a weird way of putting it.
His mother with the maid to, his father was only raping the maid.
Yeah, only is the weirdest turn of phrase here.
But the show treats this as an expert manipulation, which shifts his mother's feelings from rage to pity and allows the family to return to a sense of normalcy.
Oh my... The joke... This is actually kind of funny, because the whole point of this scene, especially in the books, but also in the anime, is that Rudy thinks that's what happens, and it's funny that he thinks that way, and that's how he portrays it to the reader, because he is so emotionally stunted, he can't understand that it didn't work at all. Like, it's not an expert manipulation tactic. It is such a blatantly obvious attempt at a manipulation tactic that everyone sees right through it. The fact that Rudy doesn't realize that everyone sees right through it is what kind of makes it a little bit funny. Like, it's not like a ha-ha funny scene, but it's like, that when you're reading that scene, that Rudy is not representing it accurately because he's just kind of emotionally stupid. And and it's one of those things, it doesn't make Zenith kind of understand what was going on, like she didn't get the real picture. It made her stop and be like, Rudy is trying to keep me from doing this. And that kind of makes her rethink her actions and think, you know what? No, sending her away to die is not what I want. It's not the right thing to do. I would not feel good about it later on. So that's what kind of makes her change her mind. Like, and it's funny that this guy has this read of this scene, because the whole point of that representation is the fact that Rudy is so bad at reading people that that's what he actually thinks happens. You're not supposed to actually agree with him, because like you're supposed to be able to see through that and be like, oh, right, no, that's not what happened. Like, holy shit. Like, I'm a bit on the spectrum, and even I could read through this. Like, Jesus Christ, this guy might be more autistic than me.
Other characters often comment on how mature or unique he is compared to other children.
Well, that's because of his adult intellect. The fact that he can speak like an adult and not speak like a child. The fact that he can have these logical pathways in his head that function like an adult and not like a child. The fact that he doesn't have the emotional reactions of things that a child would. That's why they say he's mature, because he's acting like somebody who's had more experience than a child, which he has.
They think he's capable of accomplishing tasks that children just couldn't do. The narrative both shows and tells us that Rudius is not a child despite his appearance. Even Mother's Basement recognizes that Rudius is internally an adult.
Okay, so I mean, again, I think there's also a difference between intellectually an adult and emotionally an adult, because, I mean, it's to say that his growth stopped when he started being a hikikomori is not entirely accurate. I think his entire mindset kind of got twisted and was stuck in place where it landed, and a lot of his actual emotional development happens pretty much in line with his physical age.
Having an adult mind.
Yeah, exactly, Thomas. Everyone kind of knows that Rudy's bullshitting. And if he had actually read the light novels, which that convinces me that he didn't, by the way, because the bonus chapter of the light novels pretty much says, like, where Zenith goes, I immediately knew he was bullshitting, but I saw that he was actually trying to do this thing for her, and that made me stop and think. Yeah, like, again, they don't realize that, again, Rudy had spent 20 years traumatized and in isolation, having these really unhealthy coping mechanisms. Like, is it like, and he's also kind of having to navigate his new life kind of on his own, where nobody knows what he's been through. Nobody knows how to really raise him. I mean, he confuses the shit out of the people around him, where Lilia's like, you know what? I'm just going to leave him alone. That wouldn't be what I would do for any other kid, but it seems to work for him. Fuck it. So he has to kind of work through all these things without any outside help, which is like not easy.
Piloting his child body simply allows him to direct its innately accelerated learning ability.
But not visually, right? I mean, he looks like a kid. That visual distinction seems to be enough for the narrative and the reviewers. In a different section of Mother's Basement's video, where he goes over a scene in which Rudius tries to sleep with a 12-year-old, he says this.
I won't say it's the wrong directing choice, but I won't argue with anyone who thinks it is, or anyone who thinks addressing issues of consent like that with characters this young is flat out unacceptable.
Characters this young? Rudius is 44 in this scene. He's lived 44 years. He has...
Okay, I remember because we watched the Mother's Basement video last week. He was talking about characters in an abstract sense. Like, he wasn't saying both of these characters are this age. I mean, I don't even necessarily agree with Mother's Basement's opinion that Rudy is, in all intents and purposes, a 40-ish something years old. He was talking about characters plural in the sense that, you know, talking about shows that explore topics like this with characters like this. So he's doing a semantics argument, but he's not even correct about the semantics.
Has 44 years of experience. He is not a young character. His visual youth is not enough to justify these actions. And
also, again, I am still just flabbergasted by the fact that this guy understands that the story is about Rudy overcoming a toxic mindset, but also is just shocked when the toxic mindset is just portrayed as toxic. Like, come on, dude. It's not excusing anything. It's just showing a bad thing.
By the way, anime is usually on the other side here. The show My Senpai is Annoying
I don't
aired
know
the
this show.
exact same season as the second core of Mushoku Tensei.
Okay, I mean, I know of the show. I have never seen it, so I can't talk about it.
In this romantic comedy, a very young-looking but actually 23-year-old businesswoman is the main female lead. Now clearly, this woman looks very young, but canonically she's an adult, so no one takes issue with her attempting a relationship with another adult. You cannot defend both of these shows. They are contrary to one another. One of them is a problem. Either age is experience.
Okay. I feel like he's trying to say that people are drawing comparisons between the two, but I also don't think he actually has any examples of that, so he's just kind of inventing an argument and then arguing against it, like literal straw manning. I don't like using the term straw man just because it's one of those debate bro terms that people tend to misuse. And that's one of the things is logical fallacies are one of those things that are very actually useful philosophically for understanding how argument and rhetoric work, but they're also one of those things that people who are kind of like a little bit stupid tend to latch onto. They don't really understand fallacies, and they kind of they're like, oh, that looks vaguely like a fallacy. I know it has a Latin name. I'm going to do that. But yeah. Yeah, basically the girl is like Roxy in a sense. I mean, again, I haven't seen this show, so I can't really comment on it, but yeah, I mean, again, I think he's just kind of making up an argument and arguing against it.
Experience or visuals. Personally, I'm gonna go with experience. Granted, I still find this show a bit sus visually, but on paper, it's in the right. You cannot say the same thing about Mushoku Tensei. So, now that we've established Rudius...
Okay, but also I feel like you really can't compare the two at all, because I feel like, again, based on the very little I know about that show, which I've heard good things about it, but I never got around to checking it out myself. I mean, Mushoku Tensei starts out as a story with a main character who has a very toxic mindset, who is very emotionally fucked and needs to grow from that, and that's what that character part of the story is, where the other show looks more like a slice of life rom-com. So yeah, completely different vibes they're going for. So yeah, again, I don't even see how you can compare the two.
Is an adult. That scene where Rudius tries to sleep with Eris while she's 12. He's rejected, which is good. It's a gross scene, but the show handles it as Rudius being in the wrong. However, Rudius's realization that he's being a creep is only in reference to his misunderstanding of consent and women, not to her being a child and thus completely unable to give consent in the first place.
I don't remember how the anime handles it, but I remember the books age does actually come into the question as well, where there are multiple instances where Rudy kind of has these moments of realizing, no, too young. And also, let's not forget the 5-year promise that they made was literally the idea of, hey, they will both be adults, at least in the legal sense, when this happens. Yeah, it's Evan Eagle. Oh, that was with QD, right? If I remember correctly. I mean, it's been a long time since I played Evan Eagle, but that seems like something QD would say. But yeah, okay, I lost my train of thought.
Not to her being a child and thus completely unable to give consent in the first place. And as the show goes on, Rudius continues to be a bit of a perv by actively lusting over a 12 to 14-year-old.
And also, I like how he's completely ignoring the fact that Rudy is slowly developing levels of self-control where he's like, oh, Black Dragon, yeah, you're right. Okay. Again, it's been a long time. I remembered that joke, I just didn't remember who had made it. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it's true that the morality of the world is different, but also I think it's fine to say some moral standards of history, for example, were not exactly good. I think we can kind of all agree that child marriage is probably not a good thing. People should probably not be doing that, but also understand that people engaged in that world. Yeah. And, but I mean, ultimately, I think these scenes are good because it shows that Rudy still has these feelings, but he's actually able to control himself more and more as he goes on, and as he develops, he actually, except for one or two jokes that he's almost kind of giving green lights on, he keeps his hands to himself after that moment. That's a pretty big deal. It's the feelings don't go away, but the action does change to compensate for that, which is, I think that's an important thing. And honestly, I think that actually says more about a character's growth, that they're able to act in spite of these inappropriate thoughts, as opposed to just losing the inappropriate thoughts entirely, which does end up happening, by the way. Rudy does eventually, I would argue, lose his paraphilias for underage girls. Like, I think as he develops a healthy sexuality, he stops being attracted to children. But yeah.
The narrative doesn't address or condemn this. Instead, it focuses on developing these characters and making Rudius realize that Eris is not a sexual object. She's a person that he wants to have sex with. And this culminates in him, at 47, sleeping with a 15-year-old. Yeah, he doesn't see her as an object anymore. This is a relatively tasteful sex scene between a 47 and...
Again, the fact... I just don't think... I don't agree with his interpretation of things. I don't think... I mean, it's very complicated with how Rudy is internally, because I don't think you can say he is the equivalent of a 47-year-old, because, again, the person he was not really a 34-year-old adult. He was essentially, he was at 14 was when he got isolated from the world, and he just kind of regressed from there. Like, I don't know, man. Yeah, and exactly, you're right, Sanders. It's one of those things. He just definitely seems like one of those people who can't accept moral ambiguity, understand that, hey, these characters are... He criticizes Rudy for how not viewing Eris as a person, but like also he doesn't realize that these characters are meant to be people with complex motivations and moral considerations, and like most real people, they're not all good or all bad.
15-year-old. The narrative does not condemn this act.
Also, let's also not forget that it is relevant that in this world, 15 is an adult as far as they're concerned. Yes, it is not an adult in our contemporary standards. And again, I'm not saying that if you were to happen to transport into a past time period, it would be okay for you to sleep with a 15-year-old. But in this context, they had not only reached the legal age of adulthood for her, they'd also gone on a long journey and had been basically forced to grow up because of that. So again, they kind of had to mature in ways that 15-year-olds in today's world are lucky enough to not have to do.
Now, people may argue that Eris leaving after was the condemnation.
No, it's not. It's not a condemnation. Again, that's not what this scene was going for, and that's, I think, the same kind of problem that I think when we were watching that Phonic video a while back, he kind of had the same misconceptions about this scene.
Departure does depress Rudius, after all, but she doesn't leave because she's traumatized by the experience. She leaves because she wants to get stronger so she can defend him.
Yeah, and also, I like how he ignores the fact that she initiated the scene, which is, like, important. But also, yeah, I don't understand how he also just misses... It just seems like, for this guy, I don't think he realizes that subtext exists. Because, I mean, there's always the words on the page and the exact meaning that they have, but there are also underlying messages that go beneath that, things that are left unsaid, things that, you as the audience are expected to put in a little bit of the work to figure out for yourself. Like, most media nowadays, writers kind of understand that you can let the audience kind of figure certain things out without outright saying it. And like there's a lot of stuff going on with this whole section of things happening, where Eris wanting to go to defend him is where she is having the same kind of issues as Rudy, where she feels like she's not good enough, that she's lagging behind, that she can't really be somebody who can stand next to him as an equal. So she needs to go away to train herself up so that she can actually bring value to this unit and actually feel like she has a purpose and feel worthy of him. Whereas on the other hand, he feels unworthy of her because she's this really strong person who's a lot of mental fortitude, able to push herself to be her best, and he feels like he's not good enough for her. So there's kind of this dueling sense of motivations there. But also the whole point of that scene was that, she wasn't upset with him. That's not why she left. but at the same time, he views it as her leaving him, her stabbing him when he was at his most emotionally vulnerable. This was the first time he really made himself vulnerable to somebody, and he got burned because of it. It's not like, oh yeah, she left and he got depressed. It's like, no. He had overcome his trauma to a point where he was willing to bare his soul to somebody, and what he got was what he perceived as a rejection. So that, like, as soon as he reaches that milestone, he gets punished for it. And that really just makes him completely regress in his mental health. Like, that is such honestly, I think it's just really obvious as well. Like, I don't think this stuff is even subtle. They're just showing it, like, full on. So, like, the fact that he's not even acknowledging it is fucking wild to me. Because, like, again, I get that I'm a person who, like, does a lot of, like, media analysis. This is, like, my thing. I understand that I view these things a little bit more, you know, detail-oriented than a lot of people do. But even with that taken into consideration, I think this stuff is very, very obvious.
She sees herself, the minor, as the one in the wrong, and then she screams from the mountaintops, "I love Rudius." And spoilers.
And that's also something that was a very big moment for her that he doesn't miss. But the fact that she's actually finally able to embrace and articulate her feelings, that's, you know, that was a big thing for her, that she wasn't able to, like, really come to grips with how she felt about people, with Rudy in particular. She cared about him. That's the first time she actually was able to physically, like, express that fact, to say that, yes, this is somebody that I love.
In the light novel, he marries her, as well as another girl he's also grooming. These are not...
No, he's not grooming her. They got separated at 7 years old, reunited at, like, 15. That's not how grooming works. Grooming is not you knew them when they were a child at one point. It's you raise them specifically from a childhood to be your partner. That is not what happened. It's one of the things. Grooming means something very specific. It is a very, very bad thing that happens to people. It should not happen. It is evil. I hate when people minimalize it by just calling things that aren't grooming. Like, that's I don't know. That pisses me off. And also, it's just, again, just literally, you don't even have to have subtext ability to understand that that's wrong. Literally, just look at the fucking timeline of events. Again, they have their childhood together. At 7 years old, they're separated. They each have their own, like, significant journeys. Rudy has his whole thing in the Demon Continent. Sylphie has her whole thing as Ariel's bodyguard. They are both, like, adults by the time they reunite, and that's when things actually become romantic and sexual. So it's like, I feel like it's one of those things, you can only call it grooming if you refuse to think about it.
Qualities of a narrative depicting pedophilia negatively. But why do I phrase it like that? I'm a big, strong man. Why do I need a narrative to tell me pedophilia is bad?
My, oh my, what a wonderful day.
You may have heard of a movie called Song of the South. It's a 1946 Disney movie that Disney has completely denounced.
I will say Song of the South was one of those things that's like, ooh, that was, in hindsight, that's kind of wild. Although, I will say Zippity Doo-Dah, Zippity Yay is still a great song, even if the surrounding movie is like, ooh boy.
People call it racist. But why? The movie depicts happy slaves having a good time on their plantation, telling cheerful stories of animated creatures. Well, it's racist because slaves didn't have a good time on plantations. This is not critical of slavery, instead glorifying it by depicting it in a positive light. But it's not real. This is
I will also say old Disney movies didn't have super, like, ambiguous or nuanced moral depictions of things. Things were just generally either depicted as good or as bad. They usually weren't just depicted as they are. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of neutral depictions of things, except for, like, oh, that's a rock right there. With that being the exception. So modern storytelling is much more willing, like, and that's what I think Mushoku Tensei does a lot of. It's not that saying, hey, this thing exists, the story must contort to make it good or bad. It's just, this is a thing that exists in this world. This is an event that happens. These are these characters' experiences through them. Maybe there's some sort of thematic resolution to it. Maybe it's just a thing that happens. So, yeah, and that's the thing. Old Disney movies did lean really heavy into the moralization of things. And that is why Song of the South is such an issue. Although I will say, I think it has historical value. I don't agree with completely like memory holing it, I should say, because I think it's possible to kind of view it in context and understand what it is as a work of art in itself. Because like, again, I probably wouldn't show it to a kid, but like, it's something that I don't think has to be erased from history.
Fantasy. How could something?
Because I also think understanding the attitudes of the time is also kind of important, just historically speaking.
Pedophilic. I mean, racist. And I'm not strawmanning here either. That's a real argument that people are making in defense of Mushoku Tensei. Here's Giguk, the most subscribed to anime video essayist, making the "it's not real" argument on stream after being questioned about his ranking of Mushoku Tensei as one of his top isekai.
I just like Mushoku Tensei because it's a good story. I acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of weird things and problematic aspects of the show, but I think that's fine. I think anyone who has a healthy degree of separation between real life and fantasy and a fantasy story can distinguish that.
He's literally just saying depiction does not equal endorsement, and this guy's too stupid to understand that. Like again, I don't know how Giga could have made, and I haven't seen that full video. That's something I've been wanting to watch. I'll watch it eventually, but I mean, from that clip he showed, I mean, I think he's pretty unambiguously saying, yes, I understand that there are bad things that happen in this show, but it's not real, so it's not like anyone's actually getting hurt, and it's okay that a show can contain these types of things. So, like, yeah, depiction does not equal endorsement, and this guy doesn't seem to understand that. It's like, and actually, I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. I think people can understand that depiction doesn't necessarily equal endorsement, but they do have this idea that depiction without condemnation does not necessarily equal endorsement either. That's something that people need to understand. Sometimes just bad shit happens in fictional worlds, just like it happens in real worlds. Like, yeah, and like I remember, I read the Witcher books, and I think those are actually very good. I would recommend them. And there was one scene where Geralt and his party were coming across a town that had just been attacked by an enemy army. And they ended up coming across a woman who had just recently been assaulted. And then it was one of those things where they realized it's like, it could have been a lot worse. That was kind of the rationale of one of the people in the party. It's like, it sucks, but it could have been like, it's better that this happened than something worse happened. And it was one of those things where it's like, it was like almost like excused in context, but it also wasn't an endorsement. It was just a thing of, this is the reality of this world. This is a bad thing that does happen in this situation. Yeah, and I will say, yeah, problematic is one of those words that has a lot of legitimately good uses to it, but like people have kind of co-opted it to mean thing I don't like.
Just because the media is fantasy does not mean that it's made or its messages exist within a fantasy world. The people that make media are influenced by the real world. The people that consume media influence the real world. The ideas that media present are based on its author's preconceived notions and experiences within the real world.
Yeah, and again, I still think he's just kind of missing depiction versus endorsement. Like, again, I think something can exist and not have an in-universe punishment apply to it without that being like an endorsement by the author. Like, the author doesn't have to say, like, again, I don't think, if somebody does a sexual assault in a piece of fiction, I don't think they immediately need to get retribution for it, for that to be viewed as a bad thing. Sometimes it could just be somebody did a bad thing and didn't see any consequences for it. I don't know.
And the messages media delivers alter the experiences and perceptions of the people that consume them. So,
It
Song
can.
of the South is bad because its narrative belies racist ideologies within its authors about how slavery was not that bad, and it pushes a message of slavery being not that bad to those that consume it. Mushoku Tensei.
And I will say, and I haven't seen Song of the South personally, so I can't really comment on exactly what it does, but I always got the impression that it kind of had other things going on, and it was just kind of, as like a side note, was kind of softening the reality of slavery in an inappropriate way for sure. But like, I always heard that the point wasn't necessarily to be like slavery was okay actually, but it was more like they're just kind of the way they depicted it while telling whatever they were also going for was the problem.
Of slavery being not that bad.
But again,
to
I
those
haven't
that
seen the movie.
consume it.
I can't
Mushoku
say.
Tensei is bad because it belies ideologies within its author about pedophilia being not that bad.
Yeah,
As
I
we
don't
can
agree
see
with
when
that.
characters are not traumatized by it, and even
Well, also, why would Eris have been traumatized? Like, let's not forget that at this point in the story, literally nobody except for Rudy knows that he's reincarnated. And also, let's not forget, she's a 15-year-old at this point in time. 15-year-olds are known for having sex drives. That's a thing that actually happens in the real world. I was 15 once. I can confirm this. And she initiated the encounter with Rudy. Like, she basically had to force him into it, almost. Not, like, force, but, like, she browbeat him into acquiescing. And then, so, like, why would she be traumatized? There's literally no logical reason she should have been. Like, I don't get it.
react positively to a character that actively participates in it, and through that pushes a message of it being not that bad to those that consume the media.
I disagree.
This critical look at media is called content analysis, and you can even apply it to Mushoku Tensei with
No, that's not content analysis. That's not. No.
some positive results.
This is like the video essay equivalent of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where they know a little bit about how writing works, and they assume they know everything about how writing works, and don't realize that, again, they discovered the sledgehammer and haven't yet figured out that the chisel exists. Yeah, that would be curious. I mean, I will say, it's actually really funny to see people learn about the book version of It and realize that it just casually happens to have like all the kids have an orgy at the end of it. Like, that didn't happen in any of the movie adaptations, but yeah.
Mushoku Tensei's depictions of sexual harassment, social ostracization, and self-betterment are all informed by and inform the real world. Many of the people who positively review this show cite its depiction of the main character's fucked up views on women, stemming from games and anime, as a...
I wouldn't say it's stemming from games and anime. I would say it stems from his isolation and trauma, and that he just used games and anime as a coping mechanism. And actually, I would say he did porn more than... Yeah. I mean, Stephen King is one of those people who... He's a very interesting character, because, I mean, his books are very hit and miss for me. Either I love them or I don't even finish them. And although he was also just a heavy drug user back in the day, so I would not be surprised if some of that kind of influenced his writing. I think he mentioned that he doesn't even remember writing Cujo because he was so fucked up while he was writing it.
A valid parallel to the real world, and his efforts to correct them as valid and realistic depictions of a person seeking self-betterment.
Clearly, he is growing, but while not assaulting girls in their sleep is sadly progress for him, it's not even the bare minimum. He still has to unlearn a lot of bad assumptions about women and sex that he's built up through a lifelong diet of anime porn games.
So why does this analysis stop at the sexualization of children?
To me, okay. To me,
I don't think it does. I just think he's saying that, yeah, this is kind of his starting point, and that's where he has to grow from. Like, it seems like he just doesn't understand that the idea of a character starting bad and then growing from being bad can also include depictions of things that are bad. I don't know.
I don't think it glorifies it, Because to me, I was creeped out by it, okay?
Yeah,
and
that
to
was
me,
the intended reaction.
I think that if it really glorified it, then Rudy wouldn't become slightly less horny as the series goes on.
Yeah, okay, I think that's a bit of an oversimplification. Granted, I think Giguk has not necessarily read the books, and I can't expect anybody to have. I can't expect people to read the source material before judging a piece of an adaptation. That just wouldn't be fair. But I mean, Rudy, it's not that he became less horny. It's that he kind of developed a healthy view on sexuality to the point where, he is able to kind of come to terms with the fact that, sex is not a bad thing, even though it hurt him on several occasions. He had a negative association with sex for a very long time, several years. He just realizes that, okay, I can't direct it towards things that are inappropriate, but I can express this with the people that I am in a committed relationship with. That's where it's okay. So it's not that he becomes less horny. It's that he just understands how to engage with sexuality in a healthy way. So, yeah. Yeah, less horny is a normal way of framing it. I mean, less sexual harassy for sure. Like, he becomes less of an overt creep. But, like, again, part of it is realizing that you can express sexuality with somebody that you love. And that's different, or at least with somebody who's consenting. That's different than, just kind of directing it outward at anything in your general vicinity.
It's great that Giguk was creeped out by it, honestly, but he's projecting that creeped out feeling onto the narrative. This is bad content analysis. The narrative does not agree with him.
No, yes, it does. It 100% fucking agrees with him. The whole point, as this guy himself had said earlier in this video, is that Rudy starts out with a toxic and unhealthy mindset, especially in regards to sex, but also in regards to viewing people as people, developing human connections, all of these types of things. The narrative very much frames his attraction to underage girls as a bad thing. This is something that very explicitly gets him into trouble. This is something, even if it didn't get him into trouble, it's something that it's pretty much shown that exists alongside all of his other stew of toxic mentalities. And it is no mistake that as he grows up and becomes a better person, that side of him goes away. I don't understand how he can literally acknowledge things and then say they don't exist.
Yes, Rudius gets less horny. He doesn't sexually assault women as much. But the show literally ends with him at 47 sleeping with a 15-year-old.
Well, that's also not the end of the story. That's barely the introduction to the story, but whatever.
Pedophilia does not diminish. It objectively increases. And the only...
No, it does not. He literally is shown to be less creepy and less attracted to inappropriate partners. Assuming this is made when season 1 has happened, he does actually, his window of attraction narrows substantially over the course of the first season. And again, he's completely ignoring the fact that in this world she's an adult and she kind of browbeat him into it. She was the one who initiated. He wanted to not do that until she kind of overwhelmed his emotions so that they took over his logical side. And that's not saying that she was like doing anything evil or wrong there. It's just that's just what happened in the scene. So like, it's not that his pedophilia got better. It's that his paraphilia actually was starting to go away at this point. And yeah, you could argue that it was actually gone by this point, but it's also the fact that the thing that's actually able to get him to go from thoughts to action is somebody he's developed a genuine emotional connection with, who basically had to kind of push those buttons on him to get him to actually cross that line. Like, saying it increased is, like, did we even watch the same show? I don't know.
Only narrative reaction to this is Eris, the 15-year-old, feeling like she's the one in the wrong. But these are incredibly sensitive topics.
Okay. And also, he's also playing it off like Eris should know that he's reincarnated and that he's had 34 years of experience before that, when that's also just dumb.
Narrative that doesn't glorify them even look like. Well, let's look at BoJack Horseman. He's an incredibly flawed protagonist. He's now
I don't know BoJack
a drug
Horseman.
addict. Every relationship he has is interwoven with some toxic or unhealthy social dynamic. And in Season 2, Episode 11, BoJack almost sleeps with a 17-year-old. Her mother finds them before anything happens, but it's left ambiguous whether or not he would have allowed it to go forward. And it does almost happen. But BoJack Horseman does not glorify this scene, or any of BoJack's negative traits. The entire show is about...
He did kind of misrepresent that. It's not that he said that... It's not that she felt she was in the wrong for that action. She just... That was her take on her general way of going towards things. Because she feels like she's been slacking, that, you know, Rudy has grown in all these ways and she has not really developed in the way that she should. So that was... The way of correcting that would be to, you know, lock in and actually focus on her swordsmanship and actually push herself to her limits. That was what she was saying. Yeah, he kind of misrepresented that by saying, I've been awful. Like, he seems like he was trying to imply that she was talking about the sex scene, which she was not. But yeah. And again, I can't talk about BoJack Horseman because I don't really know it, but also it just feels like it's going for a completely different tone. It's not... Mushoku Tensei is more about a guy who has this toxic mentality, doesn't even realize how toxic he is, and kind of having to be put into this position where he has to grow up and not just overcome the toxic mentality, but to kind of embrace the life he should have lived beforehand. BoJack Horseman seems like somebody who's already kind of past those initial growth stages, but kind of then needs to, from an adult perspective, overcome that, which is, it seems like it's going for a completely different type of story.
About him fighting against his worst qualities, and every time he relapses, he drives wedges further and further between himself, his friends, and any potential for happiness. The next time BoJack sees Penny, the 17-year-old, she's traumatized by what happened, and rightfully calls him out on his predatory behavior. The entire show of BoJack Horseman...
Well, again, it's also... I don't think that's a fair comparison, because again... From Eris's perspective, Rudy is 3 years younger than him. I don't see why she would be traumatized. Like, literally, what is the logical pathway that leads to thinking that Eris, in that scenario, with the information she has available to her, why would that traumatize her? It literally just does not compute to me. And I mean, granted, Eris eventually does actually learn that Rudy's reincarnated, but that's something she gives zero fucks about it ultimately, because at that point they'd already been married for a while. They kind of have their dynamic going on. She is content in her life. She's like, you know what? It's not something I care about.
Culminates in him finally reaching a state of contentment, only for this incident with Penny and others that he'd been running from catching up to him and ruining his life all over again. These are the...
Yeah, that's as far as I know, at least from the main story. I don't know about I don't know about the other stuff, but so far, like in from what I remember of the light novels, he mentions it to Nanahoshi, obviously. Then there's one time where he has a conversation with okay, I'm not going to say who it is because Turning Point 4, but that character. And at one point he's discussing it and Eris overhears them talking. So those are the only ones, yeah, and then Roxy, yeah. But yeah, he it's not something he's eager to tell people. He only kind of tells people when he doesn't really have another option. And I will say again, I can't comment about BoJack Horseman, so I don't know how much he is or isn't misrepresenting it. But based on how he seemingly intentionally misrepresented certain scenes from Mushoku Tensei, especially like lines of dialogue that were referencing one thing and he implied that they were referencing another thing, I wouldn't be surprised if he's lying about this.
Qualities of a narrative exploring the darker elements of the human condition without actively glorifying them. But Mushoku Tensei will never do this. It's too obsessed with funneling power and prestige and affection onto this audience self-insert to ever fully
calling him a self-insert is... No, because Rudy is just... I mean, he's like a pitiable character. He's not somebody people relate to, because most people don't have this type of trauma and isolation. I would argue that the typical isekai protagonist, the one who's like, you know, hikikomori, but not like super far gone, just kind of having a bad spell, essentially, that is much more akin to a self-insert. Rudy is like, his entire psyche is fucked at the start. And again, he's using, you know, the nerd culture stuff, not as something he genuinely enjoys, but because it's kind of the only thing that dulls the pain. That is not reflective of most people. That's just, I don't know.
Announce the crimes Rudius has committed. and in so doing, it's glorifying them.
No.
How do I know the narrative will never do this? Well, in episode 4, Rudius explicitly states that he...
Again, the literal next line is him backtracking and saying, no, that's a bad idea. No.
plans to groom Sylphie, and in the light novel, he marries her, as well as Eris, who he's also grooming.
That is not what grooming is. I already went on my rant earlier. I think there is more of an argument with Eris, but also it's still not a good argument. But no, they're not fucking... No, they're not being groomed. That's not what that means. That's actually harmful to actual grooming victims. Fuck off.
If the narrative was against grooming, then why is he ultimately successful? I mean, what, are you gonna try to tell me that he's the villain?
Fucking Vegeta tried to blow up a whole fucking planet, and people fucking love him.
Okay, I can already tell there's context missing from what he's saying. I don't know what preceded him saying this. I can guarantee that whatever he said before this to set up what he's saying now completely changes the flavoring of what is being talked about. Because I can imagine this guy's probably gonna say that that Giga is being like, oh, his it's okay because this thing happened or whatever. And it's not that. I think it's more likely that what he's arguing is that Vegeta did all this horrible genocidal stuff, showing that, you can depict these awful things without saying those awful things are good.
Why do they love him? Because he had
And why is he a fan? And yeah, Vegeta is a fan favorite character despite having done bad things, because you can understand that, again, fantasy and reality are different. Characters can do bad things but still be likable, that kind of thing.
a redemption arc.
Yeah.
Did we just fucking forget that Vegeta literally tried to blow up the fucking Earth, and people were just like, what a guy.
And that is also an interesting thing to note, which I've talked about this before, but at least here in the West, we seem to be much more forgiving of violence, even just catastrophically horrific violence, than we are of even like the slightest sexual incorrectness. Like even having a slightly unhealthy view on sex is literally seen as worse than genocide in a fictional context. So like, again, people can be... I don't think there's a single act of violence that the general audience couldn't be convinced to accept a redemption story from. But conversely, there are a lot of sexual wrongdoings that even relatively minor ones that like actual people in real life make when they're still learning and growing, that they think that makes a character a permanent monster. But so I can actually without even knowing the full context of what Giguk is saying, I think whatever his argument is sounds a lot more right than what this guy is saying.
Literally tried to blow up the fucking Earth, and people were just like, what a guy. What a guy.
Yeah, let's talk about villains and Vegeta. Why did he need that redemption arc? Because he was a villain when he was blowing up planets and killing people.
Okay, I also feel like this guy doesn't understand that protagonists can do bad things too. Like, you don't have to be a villain to do bad things, and you don't have to be a hero to do good things. And I will also say, genocide is objectively worse than being creepy, even creepy to children. Just Vegeta is like, just on a moral level, I would say he is way worse than Rudy.
Dragon Ball,
even though the framing is completely different, because Vegeta is again more of a cartoon than Mushoku Tensei is. It's more complicated than that, but yeah.
Actively shows characters blowing up planets and killing people. Dragon Ball actively shows characters calling him a monster for his actions. The narrative is so against Vegeta that he needed hundreds of episodes of redemption arc to turn him into a face.
Okay, but like, I think his argument is literally that people don't say it's bad, therefore it's not bad because Rifujin said so.
Rudius does not have characters calling him a monster, or even...
Well, again, I think a big part of that is that Rudy has his own self-esteem issues. He hates the person he was, and he constantly downplays himself, but what other people see, they see all elements of his personality that are actually worthy of note, that are actually like good. They see the fact, they don't see the fact that he's this guy who wasted his life, who has these inappropriate desires, who does these things and hurts people. They see the person who actually wants to be better. They see the parts of him that actually give a shit, the parts of him that are willing to sacrifice his own comfort and happiness to try to help others, the part of him that hates bullies. Like, the whole point is the juxtaposition between the fact that how he sees himself and how other people see him. And again, the light novels, a whole point of that is the fact that he's somewhat of an unreliable narrator, where he consistently downplays everything he's all about.
Even disliking him. Any main character that starts to dislike Rudius is quickly brought back to the party line. Everyone in this
and again, the Paul scenario, I talked about this in the Phoenix video, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but like, that whole scene was showing that both of them were wrong. They were both acting like total assholes, both looking past each other, both not considering what the other has been through, and that drove an unnecessary wedge between them at what should have been a happy moment. That's the whole point, and also it ties into the whole fatherhood thing that starts with Paul's father, goes into him raising his own kid, putting too much expectations on him, driving the same kind of wedge between the two of them before they reconcile, and then Rudy eventually kind of really understands that Paul was a father to him, and then I heard in Redundancy they actually do fully bring that full circle where he passes that on to his kids. I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now, but like, there's stuff going on there that this guy is brushing right past.
Show loves Rudius. He doesn't have a villain arc. He's repeatedly betrayed and heralded as a hero.
Well, it's not that... Okay, I think he's also viewing things kind of like a typical shonen story structure, where they have these kind of explicit arcs of characters going through this particular personality development, and that's kind of what this section of the story is focused on. And not that it's one long continuous story. Yes, it does have different arcs. Yes, characters go on their own journeys, but it's not like, oh, here's the villain arc. It's like, no, he also starts out as total gremlin as well.
And he definitely doesn't have a redemption arc, because this show literally ends with him sleeping with a 15-year-old.
Well, okay, again, also, saying it ends with him, it's like, again, that is like still the very beginning of the story. I would argue that Mushoku Tensei's story hasn't even started yet at the point the anime is now at the end of season 2. I would say the story like really kicks off at turning point 4, which has not been shown yet. That's going to happen in season 3. Saying that the show ends, like, the story's not over. Like, it's barely even begun. Hell, a lot of the main cast has not been introduced at this point. So again, I don't see how he can say that. He's acting like this is a finished product. It's like he reads, like, I don't know, it's like he reads the first few chapters of a book and then says, oh, this guy's still an asshole. He can't have a redemption story. He's not being treated as a good person eventually because I'm at chapter 3 and he's still doing all this awful shit. That's basically what he's saying about Rudy, because... And he knows that the light novels exist. He knows that the story goes on past this. So I don't understand where, like... I feel like my brain is short-circuiting almost as much as his right now.
Above all, there's this pervasive statement by Mushoku Tensei's supporters that it's totally okay if this show is just too edgy for you.
Still, I can't blame anyone who just nopes the fuck out of the hole.
Honestly, I get this argument here where it's like, you know, you say, hey, this might be too much for you. Okay, you can just kind of say it's not for you and move on. I don't know. I think with Mushoku Tensei, yeah, that's kind of bitch behavior. Like, I think that as far as edgy media goes, Mushoku Tensei is on the tamer side. Like, when I say that about certain pieces of media, it's about stuff that's a lot more extreme than Mushoku Tensei. I think people can accept Mushoku Tensei if they really actually just go in with an open mind and actually consider what it's trying to do on an emotional level. Because there's stuff that makes you uncomfortable, but it's not actually that... It's really not that intense. And again, I'm coming from the perspective of someone who has read the Euphoria visual novel and really liked it. That is, like, still to this day, one of the most extreme stories I've ever read. Has a lot of really horrifically awful shit in it. And it's one of those ones that I say, yeah, you know what? Not everybody is going to be able to handle this. That's why I always give the caveat of recommending it. I say, if you can handle that really extreme fucked up shit, then you should read it, because it actually utilizes the extreme nature of those stories, of the events that happen, like the crazy levels of trauma that people experience and inflict on one another. They use that in a way that other stories can't. That's one of the reasons I like this visceral, edgy type of storytelling, which Mushoku Tensei is not that, by the way. It has some serious moments, but as far as stories go, it's, even looking at it as a whole meta thing, it is very, very tame. Hell, even like anyone who's read the books in the chat right now, which I think is most of you, or at least most of you who are active in the chat, think of how many major characters died by the end of the main Mushoku Tensei story. It's fewer than you'd expect, huh? Like, not even many people die during that show, during that series. Not very much awful shit actually happens. So, again, I think people are kind of, you can, I can name, I can name about that many too if I really think about it. But like, even as far as just major allied characters go, there's like one significant time that happens, really. But I mean, there's more than that. But like, there's like one moment that's given any kind of real heavy gravitas, and like, I remember finishing the book, I'm thinking, oh, wow, I expected more people to die during that 26 books. But yeah, so I actually do disagree with the argument that, oh, it's okay if it's too much for you. I'm like, no, I think if it's too much for you, you kind of need to work on that.
Second it starts before seeing where they're going with it.
Because, I mean, I think that this argument of, and I get where he's coming from, and again, I do agree with that argument with other pieces of more intense media. But I think like, if Mushoku Tensei is too much for you, you just are incapable of handling any degree of discomfort, and that is really going to harm your ability to enjoy any type of writing.
It is hard to recommend watching.
You know, if you can't handle some of the scenes in this show, we totally get it.
People who get put off by the stuff that Rudy does, I've never had a more understandable have a nice day moment in my life.
But at its core,
yeah, again, I also do fundamentally disagree with that. I think it's one of those ones where I can understand saying, you know what, maybe it's not worth trying to argue this point. It's not the hill I'm going to die on. But also it's like, I can also understand the initial aversion. I just think, hey, actually kind of like engage with it honestly and don't be a moron. And I think you'll understand what it's doing. Even if it's not for you, I think you can get it.
I've never had a more understandable have a nice day moment in my life.
But at its core, it's a good show.
I've definitely found my own viewing experience to be profoundly worthwhile.
A good story.
I think it's an amazing show. I think that there are a lot of amazing...
Why is he saying it like that? Oh, it's a good story. Oh, it has good writing. Like, yeah. Yeah, that tends to be how things go. And his core argument, again, seems to be that bad things are depicted and not explicitly condemned, therefore they are good, which is, I don't know, this guy... I don't know.
Things about this show that is not just that one problematic and one really weird thing.
Yeah, I don't know about that one, fam. I would say that a narrative that actively promotes pedophilia is intrinsically flawed.
I would agree, but also that's not what Mushoku Tensei is.
It's a bad narrative, objectively.
No, look, even if it was promoting pedophilia, that would still be a subjective thing to say that it's bad. It would be an interpretation I would agree with. I would agree that that's bad, but objectively bad is not true. Like when I analyze media, I don't do it from a purely objective lens. I do it from actually a subjective core is how I review stuff, because I think so much of what writing does is how does it make you feel? And then trying to find the objective reasons that it did that. So saying something is objectively good or objectively bad, just on its own, especially if you're applying it to a moral argument, because that is even another layer of subjective on top of that. Like, no, you just can't accurately say that. That's wrong. No.
But maybe I'm alone in thinking that. Fuck, that's depressing.
Okay, so yeah. Yeah, so that was a video. I'll be honest, if it's rage bait, it is very good rage bait. Like, it is impressive how badly he missed the mark on a lot of things. And I think some of the little notes he added were just dishonest enough that they could have been bait. It's hard to say. Like, I don't know. But again, I just want to completely reiterate what I was saying earlier. Do not be a dick to this guy. I know I linked the video in the chat earlier on. I don't think I'm going to add it into the description of this video just because I don't want to even kind of enable people to, of the VOD. I don't want to even like kind of even be seen as tacitly endorsing giving this guy any shit. So again, anyone watching the VOD right now, later on in after this is live stream has ended, do not go find this guy. Do not contact him. Do not be a dick. Say whatever you need to say in the comments of this video. That's where it's going to be. Because again, and I mean this genuinely, despite the fact that this video annoyed the shit out of me and that I think it's a very bad video, regardless of that, his efforts in creating this video enabled me to make this content on stream. And that is something I genuinely appreciate. And if you do go to find this guy, it should be to give him watch time, give him engagement on the video, not to be a dick. I mean, regardless of how annoyed the video made me, I am genuinely appreciative that he took the time to make this video so that I could make the stream content on top of that. Like, I am not being, like, I'm not, like, covering my ass. I'm not being facetious. That is genuinely how I feel. That is how I feel as somebody who does video essays myself, who knows what goes into creating these things, who would want people to have a degree of respect for my work. So I want to have a degree of respect for his work, even if I disagree with it. So please do not be an asshole to this guy, okay? That's all I'm gonna say about that. And ultimately, I don't think that's a huge risk, just because, again, I'm not planning on uploading this as a standalone. That kind of thing will happen if I ever decide to make that other like VOD and live stream clips channel. Eventually, I might do it, but that's like a lot of extra work. But yeah, so honestly, as much as I didn't like that video, as much as I think it's a bad video, and again, another thing to be is that he only has 500 subscribers. You know, he's not looking for this kind of smoke. So again, people don't really know how this is doing this. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to be giving this guy any shit. This is going to be the extent of how much I comment on this guy. That should be the extent of how you guys comment on this guy. Okay. All right, we're good. So that's going to be all for today. I had a good time with that. And again, even though I didn't like this final video, I had a good time watching it, a good time reacting to it, good time responding to it. Because again, complaining about things is fun. So I enjoyed it. So again, thank you guys for showing up. I do appreciate whether you chatted, lurked, or anything in between. Do keep in mind, like what I said at the beginning of the stream, something we got to consider. Next week will be when we will be caught up with Mushoku Tensei. So that means the week after, we're going to have to change things up, do something different. So a couple options I have in mind. I just, again, I want this to be something that you guys who watch this think about it and just kind of, you know, think of what you would be interested in. A couple options I'm having is one, I do eventually want to watch Frieren, but I'm going to wait for, that's going to be part of the daily stream. So I'm going to wait until at least after that point. And yeah, like Alan is saying, reading the actual light novels is something I'm considering doing a same kind of in-depth analysis that we're doing, while also just kind of reading through them. Another option is Love Alternative, the anime adaptation, because I love the visual novels so much, but the fucking anime adaptation fucks up in so many ways that basically I would be having a weekly crash out on stream, which I think could be a lot of fun. Or if there's anything else you guys are interested in. Another possibility is I've lately been getting a decent amount of independent visual novel developers contact me, trying to get me to make a video about their stuff. You know, maybe I could some point play through some of those on stream and give general thoughts, since unfortunately it's usually not worth the effort to actually make a full video about these unknown projects as much as I would like to. It's just, you know, those videos don't do well. So again, next week I'll take your guys' thoughts into consideration and I'll come to a decision. Just again, if there's something that's really harding for is, yeah, maybe we'll see. Ultimately, I'm probably going to just do the talking if I do the novels, just because, I don't know, I feel like minimizing the potential what people could see as copyright infringement is probably a good idea. Like, if I'm already going to be kind of playing fast and loose by reading the book itself, which I think will be fair use, but doing it with the audiobook is just, I don't know, it seems like there's another layer of stuff I don't want to kind of mess with because, you know, regardless of the practical implications of things, I still want to do things ethically. So, yeah. Thanks, guys, for showing up. I appreciate you. I will see you guys tomorrow for another daily stream, which will be Captain Tsubasa, 7 p.m. Eastern. Oh, and I will say, I know I mentioned that Wednesdays are going to be my days off for the time being. This week it's going to be Thursday so I will stream on Wednesday. I will not stream on Thursday because Thursday I'm going to be basically my sister's coming home from college. That's going to be the day that I'm going to be able to see her. So that's what I'm going to do. So yeah, thanks for showing up. Stop by tomorrow if you want to see the daily stream. Stop by next week if you want to see the finishing of Mushoku Tensei.